is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, August 3rd, 2023. My name is Emma Vigeland in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Azad Essa, author of Hostile Homelands, the new alliance between India and Israel. And later in the show, Paris Marx of the Disconnect newsletter will be with us to discuss general Silicon Valley dystopia. Meanwhile, Trump to appear in federal court later today to enter a plea on the 4-count indictment handed down on Tuesday evening. Dots are being connected, and the 6th unnamed co-conspirator may be Boris Epstein. Yeah, people speculated maybe Roger Stone. It's looking like it may be Boris. Meanwhile, the share of Republicans who thinks that Biden's 2020 win was illegitimate has ticked up from 63% earlier this year to nearly 70% now. The sexual harassment lawsuit against co-conspirator 1, aka Rudy Giuliani, has taken a turn. Leaked audio transcripts show him mocking Jewish genitalia? Homophobia, racism, a bunch of gross sex stuff. The works. The Pittsburgh synagogue shooter has been sentenced to death. He killed 11 in a hate crime. People are not meshing with the nominally positive economic news. Half of Americans see the economy as getting worse. And the Bank of England, following the Fed's lead, raises interest rates to a 15-year high. House Republicans stall on Sherrod Brown and J.D. Vance's rail safety bill, despite weeks of milking the East Palestine rail disaster for points. A federal appeals court further limits abortion access in Guam. Another federal court upholds trans students' bathroom access in Indiana, so that's good news. And in good news as well, in Wisconsin, a firm brings a lawsuit against the state's Republican gerrymander districts to the freshly liberal state Supreme Court. Give them hell. Texas AG Ken Paxton to appear in a Houston court today for his securities fraud trial. And lastly, despite it being midwinter, scorching heat is hitting South America, including an August record in Chile. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. EmMajority Report is what it should be called. Hello to Bradley. Hello to Matt.
Hello.
Yeah, so I guess Wednesday, I take some odd Wednesdays off. That must have been the first time that I was out for a major news story and Sam was in. It's usually the reverse.
Yeah, Sam noticed that too.
Well, our brains are
It's
becoming
like,
one.
I'm here for one of these.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. Starting to think alike, but yeah, I mean, I read a lot of the indictment as a lib moment for me, but it's a massive moment. It really is. I don't know how much it changes things electorally. We'll have to see that play out. But the indictment,
I kind of feel like that's beside the point, and people rush to that a little bit too much. Like,
yeah.
How is this going to play? Like, and even people that act like they're above electoral politics, I'm like, oh, well, it's not going to. That's not the question right now. The question is like, yeah, guys close to the president were saying, hey, let's steal this thing and then use the Insurrection Act to put down riots. Yeah,
exactly. Like, we have to reckon with the moment outside of the electoral politics element, which is that this is a historic indictment. It's frustrating that it took the January 6th committee to get this going. I mean, Merrick Garland could have started this process a lot earlier. But Jack Smith, I mean, a lot of legal experts have called it a masterclass. I don't have the authority or understanding to speak to that specifically, but from my reading of it, it was very effectively laid out. What I found to be the most kind of poignant elements were the lists of the numbers of times that Trump, Giuliani, and the other co-conspirators were told that their claims were false and how they pressed forward regardless. It also appears as if not naming the co-conspirators just yet is part of a strategy to get Trump prosecuted more quickly. Because once charges are brought against the other co-conspirators, then the cases become intertwined. That could bog down the process. And so essentially, it seems like they're trying to get this in before the convention, which is in July in 2024. And another thing that experts have pointed out is that the allegations can be applied to all counts, which expedites the trial because it essentially streamlines the process. I'm not sure how much Sam went over this, but really what stuck out to me yesterday was, or on Tuesday when reading this, is like the moment where co-conspirator 4, Jeff Clark, who was terrifyingly close to being Attorney General, he would have been acting AG if there was not this internal revolt telling the Deputy White House Counsel that they would use the Insurrection Act, deploying troops against anti-Trump protesters in order to stay in power. That's what indicates a plan, and that's what we zeroed in on yesterday. That's a coup attempt. Okay, yeah. I mean, that was the scariest part for me, at least.
Yeah, I mean, and to see people being like, well, if you actually prosecute Trump for this stuff, it might lead to riots because people don't trust the institutions. Probably the bigger threat to that is a conspiracy to retain power and then use the Insurrection Act to put down riots they expect because they know they cheated.
Exactly. That is such pedantry, frankly. And it's just like general sneering at liberals or kind of MSNBC types who are up in arms about this or who are fawning at the historic moment. You can find that cringy and then also be clear that this is a historic moment.
I think it's cringier by far to do what Greenwald's doing than
I agree.
resistance libs are doing at this point.
Well, and the other thing that stuck out too, I just want to say, is like that Trump and Giuliani were calling senators to lobby them at 6 p.m. on January 6th, after the break-in and the violence and the riots were well underway at this point. Yeah, on the news, they were doing so.
As the folks don't remember, what'd you say, 6 p.m.?
6 p.m.
Yeah, we were trying to leave the show. I was like impatient to get out of here. I mean, I had just started, right? It was like one of the craziest moments to watch it in real time. Mm-hmm. But anyway, here's Mike Pence reacting to the news here of the indictment. And for his part, at least, he comes out looking better than the other Trump people. Apparently he took many notes about his meetings with John Eastman, who's co-conspirator number 2, apparently, and Trump. I would say, though, that the fact that those meetings happened and lasted as long as they did indicates that Mike Pence wasn't like, screw off, I'm not engaging in this whatsoever. He at least had some thoughts about it, but he comes out looking better, and he's going to capitalize ultimately,
on this.
The calculus we all did live, which is that Trump already got his Supreme Court justices. Like, they got what they want. Why are they going to try a coup to retain that anyway?
Yeah. And I just want to say, too, Mike Pence does come out looking better from a legal perspective. He's going to top out at like 3% in the Republican primary race to bring in the electoral element, but here he is.
And irrespective of the indictment, I want the American people to know that I had no right to overturn the election. And then on that day, President Trump asked me to put him over the Constitution, but I chose the Constitution, and I always will. And I really do believe that anyone who puts themselves over the Constitution should never be president of the United States. And anyone who asks someone else to put themselves over the Constitution should never be president of the United States again. I've been very forthright about this issue, and I'll continue to be. Now, with regard To the substance of the indictment, I've been very clear. I had hoped it wouldn't come to this. I had hoped that this issue and the judgment of the president's actions that day would be left to the American people. But now it's been brought in a criminal indictment, and I can't assess whether or not the government has the evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt what they assert in the indictment. And the president's entitled to a presumption of innocence.
All right, yawn, whatever.
Later he says Trump believed everything, or told him everything his itching ears wanted to, which is, I think, a biblical reference.
But I mean, he's a part of him and Bill Barr doing their little victory laps on the news, and they do deserve some crumb of credit that they did not try actively to overturn the democratic results of an election, and Bill Barr resigned I guess either early December or late November after it became clear that Sidney Powell was insane and that none of this was going anywhere. But they are still incredibly dangerous from an ideological perspective, and let's not give them their flowers too much, because they were more than comfortable consorting with these kinds of people until it got to a point where it was untenable for them. They were fearful of literally going to jail or getting in Mike Pence's case hung. There were fears for themselves that I would say were the driving factors here, not democracy. Because even Pence says it there. He was hoping that it didn't come to this, that it didn't come to some sort of prosecution. I would posit that the prosecution should have started immediately after the coup attempt happened as a way to ensure the democratic functioning of our society remains in somewhat tact. Now, thankfully, it's happening now. Jack Smith, I think, did a great job with the indictment. But here's co-conspirator one, Rudy Giuliani, speaking on Newsmax in the immediate aftermath of the indictment going public. And he basically cries, which is fun for everybody. But, they're going to deny to the bitter end. And I think it's instructive because this is how a lot of political operatives operate, honestly. They don't really need to believe what they're saying, and then when they get cornered, it's really about saving their own skin. Here he is talking to Eric Bolling.
So what do you say to Jack Smith? I mean, and again, I guess you have to be careful what you say. He still is the special investigator, the special prosecutor.
I kind of holds
yours and others' future. Go ahead.
I long ago stopped being careful, and I don't worry about the Jack Smiths of this world. I have a chapter in my book called Stand Up to Bullies. So here's what I say to Jack Smith. After the Supreme Court threw out your case, which should have been a disgrace, and you should have gone and found another profession because you don't belong in this one. This one will be your legacy, violating the right of free speech of an American citizen. Never mind whether he was president or not. It could be anybody. It could be a homeless person. You don't get to violate people's First Amendment rights, Smith, no matter who the hell you are, or no matter how sick you are with Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah.
And this isn't the first time you've acted like an unethical lawyer. It should be the last.
Bang that paper, Rudy.
Speech defenses, which Robbie Soave of The Hill, I believe, has been making, and all these sort of libertarians, is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. You can't do things with words like crimes.
The indictment goes to great lengths at the outset on one of the first pages to say Trump and, I don't know if they talk about the co-conspirators specifically, but Trump had a right to lie about the election. He had a right to say what he wanted about the election. It was not the speech. It was the actions that were taken with both the fraudulent elector conspiracy, which was the avenue that was taken in, spearheaded by co-conspirator 5, Ken Chesebro, even though I want to say Cheesebro every single time, and through the avenue of John Eastman, who was pressuring Mike Pence to slow down the process in his ceremonial role on January 6th. These were active plans that were put into motion in a variety of different instances. And you had state legislatures in Michigan and in Arizona who were just like, there's just no way for me to do this because all of these claims are bogus and nuts and Sidney Powell has lost her mind. We can't back this up even though we want to help you out. That was the only thing that stopped some of these plans from going into motion. So it's not the speech. It's not the speech. It's the plans. It's the crimes. It's the actions. And that defense is going to be, I mean, I think what they're going to have to rely on in the public, but behind the scenes, they've got to know it's bunk.
Isn't Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, weren't they just doing free speech from those phone calls?
Exactly. I mean, I guess like most crimes, unless they're wordless, involve certain elements of speech, but that doesn't mean that the speech is what we're talking about. Like,
aren't I exercising my free speech when I go up to someone on the street and say, run your pockets?
Yeah,
Give me everything you have.
You are exercising your free speech.
That's literally just the First Amendment.
Why are they persecuting you?
Yeah.
I mean, the only crimes in this country that can get prosecuted are wordless murders.
Yeah, also Lawboy had a good tweet. I love that Trump truly believed he won the election and therefore did not commit a crime angle, because it's basically an argument that if you have narcissistic personality disorder, you're allowed to commit fraud.
Yeah.
Your Honor, this is...
Isn't that Ben Shapiro's argument?
Yes, that's been... yes, exactly. That's been Ben Shapiro's argument for this, like, basically 8 years.
Yeah.
Your Honor, this man is so detached from reality that it is technically legal for him to attempt coups.
Perfect. Lawboy, always on point. Well, that's that. I love seeing Rudy Giuliani cry, and we will hear more news. Maybe a trial date will be set today. I'm not exactly sure, but at least Trump is entering his plea late this afternoon. We'll have an update on this to start the show on Friday. All right, guys, quick break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by Azad Essa. We are back, and we're joined now by Azad Essa, senior reporter at Middle East Eye, author of Hostile Homelands, the new alliance between India and Israel. Azad, thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me, Emma.
So, yeah, of course. You open your book framing both India and Israel as being indelibly linked to British imperialism. And I think the former is pretty well understood if you have like some basic understanding of, colonialism and all of that. But the latter, not so much. So let's just start there. Why did you think it was important to connect those two things at the start?
Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. Yeah, so under normal circumstances, people don't think that India and Israel are connected in any way. They think that, India was fighting against the British, and Israel being an apartheid state. How can you compare these two countries? But the story between India and Israel is a lot more complicated than people suggest or people understand. So to answer your question more succinctly, the reason for people's misunderstanding about India's independence is that the Indian National Congress, right, when it started in the late 19th century, early 20th century, it basically was fighting against the British to create an independent India. And so it naturally moved towards the Palestinians and to the Arab world, because they were also fighting against the British. And so there was this understanding that Jewish migrants, Jewish refugees, Jewish settlers that were coming into Palestine, that these were part of a colonial project by the British. So that's why India was seen as being closer to Palestine. Now, what happens is that it's true that Gandhi said and Nehru said that the idea of a Jewish state is something colonial. But what happens is that the Holocaust takes place in the 40s, and what happens also after that is that India becomes a state, and it becomes a state like any other state with sort of interests, realist interests. And so one of the first things that they consider going forward, right, is that who has energy resources to help India, develop the economy. And so they look at the Arab world and they look at the small country called Israel, and they decide we need to continue with this so-called pro-Palestine policy. But actually, it's driven by an interest to look after the energy resources. Now, after that, there's also the occupation of Kashmir that starts in 1947, and India does not want the Arab world to move towards essentially Pakistan regarding this matter. And so they essentially, push a pro-Palestine position. Now, following that, India has a war with China in 1962, and even though it does not have relations with Israel, it gets arms from Israel. And the reason I pick this up now with you is because it shows the duplicity of this policy. They don't have diplomatic ties. They don't even have a consular office, a popular consular office in India. But when it asks Israel for arms, it says, send me your arms without any markings on the ships. Don't put your flag on the ships. And so from the 60s, Israel and India start working together secretly. And this develops through the 70s. But in the 80s, what happens is that India wants to join the global capitalist economy and become closer to the US. And it's told by Jewish, Israeli, or pro-Israeli groups in the US that if you want to be close to Israel, if you want to be close to the US, you need to go through Israel.
Yeah, and so, I mean, it's helpful to understand, I think, how indelibly linked relations are with Israel in relation to U.S. power and U.S. empire, right? In that hostilities towards Israel are met, I think, at least with some backing from U.S. empire and power, and thus having that back channel for India was really important, but then it had to become more public facing as the years went on.
Absolutely, and there are different dimensions to this. The first thing is that if you are joining the global capitalist economy at a time in which the Soviet Union is seen to be falling, right? They know that this is going to happen soon, but they don't know when. They need an extra channel, or they need an extra source of arms. And the Soviet Union were the biggest supplier of arms to India for the longest time. In fact, Russia now is still the biggest supplier. But they needed a second supplier. And the US has always had a kind of ambiguous relationship with India because of India's closeness to the Soviet Union for the longest time. Now, if they prove themselves to be close to Israel, then they can basically show themselves to be part of the US imperial project in some form. So I'm not saying that India is completely part of the US imperial project, because they're not. If you think about BRICS, and you think about them even talking about, leaving the US dollar, for instance, as a currency. But they want to be close to the US as a kind of Trojan horse, right? And to be to be part of that agenda, as well as be close to the global South. And that's why the pro-Palestine labels are so important to India, because that is their ticket to being seen as kind of like anti-imperial.
Gotcha. But at the same time, they're purchasing weapons from Israel, which has now become this very robust, has its own very robust, I should say, arms industry. They were the 10th largest exporter, I believe, last year. But in the lead up to that, can you talk a bit more about Kashmir and how India's relationship with Kashmir and the occupation developed over that time period to the present?
Yeah, just before we talk about Kashmir, you're totally right about the arms industry, and that is actually it's actually the core of the relationship between India and Israel. India buys more arms from Israel than any other country in the world. We're talking about $1 to $2 billion a year. And this has been going on for the past 20 years. In fact, under Narendra Modi, the arms the arms purchases increased between 2015 and 2019 by 175%.
Wow.
And so we're talking about not like Mickey Mouse arms. We're not talking about small handguns. We're talking drones. We're talking about sensors. We're talking about creating fences on the borders with Pakistan. We're talking about surface-to-air missiles, long-range ones. And India now is developing weapons with Israel in Indian factories. And so by developing these weapons, India then becomes a kind of way for Israel to expand the market for its weapons. So there are many countries in the world who won't buy from Israel, at least publicly they won't. But they can now buy weapons through India because of the relationship that India has with those states. To go to your question about Kashmir, India basically started this project in 1947. We know about the Nakba. A lot of people know about the Nakba between 47, 48, 49, in which 720,000 Palestinians were expelled and thousands were killed. And what we don't know is that there was a similar type of ethnic cleansing that took place in Kashmir in 47, in which what historians say around 200,000 Kashmiris were killed, another 500,000 Kashmiris were expelled. And this starts off a kind of occupation and a settler colonial project from that moment. And through the decades, India tried to use democracy, secularism, development as a way to kind of like massage their occupation on the region. And things take a turn in the 80s when a kind of election that takes place in Kashmir is seen as completely fraudulent, and a resistance movement starts, including an arms movement starts. And since 1990 to today, around 70,000 Kashmiris have been killed. And over the last few years, what India has done under the Modi government is that they revoked a special clause in the constitution called Article 370 and Article 35A, which gave Kashmir a kind of semi-autonomous status within the Indian constitution, and also revoked the protection of land in the region, meaning that land now can be purchased by anyone. And that means that India now is like passing these kind of laws in which it facilitates Indians coming into Kashmir to buy land, to become residents. And
that sounds familiar. That sounds a little bit familiar to what we're seing in Israel right now.
Well, that's why it's kind of like we call it the Israeli model in a way. Because, what they are doing is that they're encouraging people to come in and buying up these places, also suddenly saying that these shops or farms are now state land, so-called state land, and now they are taken over. They're using the same bulldozers that Israel uses in the West Bank. It's from Britain, right? I think it's called JCB bulldozers. And what has happened now is civil society is completely crushed. Journalism is like criminalized. I just did a story yesterday in which several Kashmiris reported that their passports have been revoked, so they can't travel outside either. So this is the kind of thing that's basically taking place. And the idea now is that once you flood the place with outsiders, then you have an election later on, and then suddenly there's no dispute anymore because you have all these other people there.
Right. And I mean, I guess this is kind of the common sense next question, but can you talk a bit about the similarities between Kashmir and Palestine in the positions that they're in, and by extension, Hindutva and Zionism and the connections between those two ideologies?
Sure. I mean, we can first talk about the methods, right, and the similarity in the methods. So both Palestine and Kashmir are extremely surveilled societies, and that doesn't mean that they're the only ones. There's also other places around the world, right? You think about Xinjiang or East Turkestan. But it has become very sophisticated in Kashmir since 2000s with the help of Israelis. Both armies use maiming as a method of quelling and punishing dissent. Israel shoots Palestinian protesters in the limbs, so they aren't able to walk. Kashmiris have been shot in the eyes with lead pellets, rendering them blind. Civil society is completely intimidated and attacked routinely. Both label them terror organizations. And interestingly, since I also brought up the China comparison, is that both use the language or the vocabulary of being democratic, and crucial part here. Both say that they're democratic, but at the same time, they intimidate civil society, suppress journalism. They bomb in Israel, in Gaza. Israel bombs media offices, right? And in Kashmir, they cut the communications, so no one can communicate. So this use of democracy is very sinister from both places. Then there's collective punishment. Indian authorities block roads and damage the economy if they want to punish the society. Israelis control people's movements continuously. Then they both don't return bodies of rebel fighters, or they destroy homes of anyone who's associated with them. Then there's question of resources. Israel steals Palestinian land and resources and then talk about the desert blooming, right? In Kashmir, large chunks of land are taken over by the army, and the Indian government talks about environmentally friendly projects. So the greenwashing is also a shared tactic. So is pinkwashing. There's all these kind of legal justifications for pursuing these projects. Now, in terms of Zionism and Hindutva, right, both are fundamental to the states of Israel and India. And both Hindutva and Zionism are marked by, I would say, to summarize, they're marked by two ideas, and that is an expansionist idea and an exclusionary idea. So, for instance, you think about Israel and Zionism, there's this idea of Eretz Israel, that Israel could start and end anywhere, meaning that there's no, the Israeli constitution does not have, Israel does not have a constitution, and it means that there are no borders. So they can talk about any land and link it to the Bible, and that could be part of Israel. Likewise, Hindutva, in terms of this expansionist idea, they call it Akhand Bharat, which is greater or undivided India. And in their imagination, India starts in Afghanistan and ends in Myanmar. And so in their mind today, Pakistan, for instance, is Muslim-occupied India. Likewise, there's the exclusionary aspect. If you think about the Citizenship Amendment Act in India, which is very similar to the Jewish right of return law, in which it kind of privileges one ethnicity or one religious group. Essentially what we're talking about now is these two ideologies becoming very much the definition of the state, in which if you're not Jewish or if you're not Hindu, then you're not part of the nation. You could be a citizen potentially, but you're not part of the nation. Therefore, you are second class or you're an excess population.
I mean, and you're not, the nation having this ethno-state kind of construction that's just nationalism, and then we're in some really pretty scary right-wing territory here.
Yeah, absolutely, and also one thing about this is that when we think of Zionism is on a spectrum. There's liberal Zionists, the cultural Zionists, and they're sort of like right-wing Zionists. But Zionism, it's predicated on ethnic cleansing. It's about replacing people. And Hindutva also exists on a spectrum in which even the prior government, the Indian National Congress, they also may have been speaking with one side of the mouth about secularism, but the other side of the mouth, they were also Hindu nationalists. And so this is not just about Modi. It's not just about Netanyahu as well. This is about a deep-seated idea that exists in both states, and it's very, very hard to get rid of.
Well, even though you said it's not about Modi or Netanyahu, I'm now about to ask you about Modi and Netanyahu, just because I am curious about their relationship and how that's developed.
So, officially, as statesmen, Modi and Netanyahu met in New York in 2014 at the UN General Assembly. And since then, the media has sort of like described this relationship as a kind of bromance. And one of the things about this relationship, one of the things about this relationship is that whereas India has had a relationship with Israel, like officially, in terms of a normalized relationship since 1992, it was never really a public relationship. But with Modi embraced Israel. Modi embraced Netanyahu, and he made very clear that he wanted to be kind of a version of Netanyahu, someone who endorses unapologetically a religious nationalism, someone who's militaristic, someone who's proud of these values, right? And so he reaches out to Netanyahu, and Netanyahu kind of accepts this, as well as reaches out to Modi, because to have the world's so-called largest democracy on your side is a huge boon for Israel. And Netanyahu then can claim that he is essentially expanding Israel's political reach around the world. Okay, and he has ended this sort of like hostility from India. Now, Modi visits Israel in 2017, and they meet in Haifa in the Mediterranean Sea, and they walk. They pick up their pants and to above their ankles, and they sort of like walk on the shoreline, and they sort of like whisper sweet nothings into each other's ears. And the reason I say this is because the imagery is really important here, because politicians and businessmen meet in a boardroom, right? But like brothers or old friends meet on the beach, for instance, and it's informal. And so the imagery and the symbolism here is that these two countries, these two ancient civilizations, are kind of meeting. They finally join their kinship,
the kinship of, what are they talking about? How much Muslims suck? I mean, like, isn't that really that really their shared their shared principles? Is it that, to say it crudely, that's how it's distilled in, or what it distills into?
Yeah, so basically, the idea is that for Hindutva, for Hindu nationalists, India was a great civilization before, and it was primarily a Hindu state, and Muslims came and basically contaminated it. And they love the idea of how Zionists and Israel and Netanyahu deal with these Muslims in their vicinity. They are enamored by how they're able to get away with it as well. And so getting away with it is also contingent on US support in their mind. And so, of course, you're absolutely correct. The glue that binds these two ideologies is Islamophobia. Yeah.
And I guess my last question here before I let you go is, how is Pakistan in responding to this? I mean, this is, I guess, India becoming even more emboldened and saying, well, we don't really need the rest of the Arab world. We're gonna make these connections more public. We are the biggest country by population in the world. We have all this economic power. Our relationships with the United States are still on solid ground, despite the far right inclinations of the Prime Minister Narendra Modi. How is Pakistan in responding to this?
So this is an interesting question, because what this has done is that, we have to take a step back here. The reason India has been able to push itself so close to Israel, especially in the past 5 or 6 years, is because of the Abraham Accords. Because essentially what has happened is that India has always been nervous. India is not a very original country in terms of its foreign policy. It's very careful. Think about what's happening with Russia as well. It's kind of toes a line. It's very careful not to go on either side of the debate. And when it comes to the Arab world and India waited until sort of these Abraham Accords were passed, and so that meant that it didn't feel that it was going to receive any blowback from the Arab world. And so you could say that it accelerated the relationship between India and Israel to a large extent, because of Bahrain, because of the UAE, because of even Saudi even considering moving towards Israel. Now, what that means for Pakistan is that Pakistan doesn't have the leverage at all. It has absolutely no leverage. And instead, it is being pushed by those states as well behind the scenes to become closer to Israel. And so you could say in many ways, Pakistan is sort of like suffering because it's unable to use the leverage towards Palestine or towards Israel, because the Arab world doesn't support it either anymore.
Really appreciate your time today, Azad Essa. The book is Hostile Homelands, The New Alliance Between India and Israel. We will put a link to the book in the description, wherever you're listening to or watching this, at majority.fm. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.
All right, folks. Quick break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by Paris Marx. are back, and we are joined now by Paris Marx, host of the podcast Tech Won't Save Us, and the mind behind the Disconnect newsletter, which is critical writing about tech in Silicon Valley. Paris, thank you so much for coming on today.
Of course, great to speak with you again.
Yes, welcome back. And never has criticism of Silicon Valley been more necessary. We'll talk about Elon Musk a little bit, but here's the big question. Is it your sense that Silicon Valley has always been this right-wing, full of libertarian kind of ghouls, or and that they're just showing it now? Or has there been a shift, would you say, in recent years?
I feel like it's a bit of both in a sense, right? I think that these right-wing strands have always been in Silicon Valley. You go to someone like Peter Thiel, who has been very influential in the Valley for a long time and hit the kind of, PayPal mafia, the kind of group that he's had around him for a couple decades now. And they have always been very right-wing and pushing quite right-wing politics, sometimes very explicitly, sometimes that's been more hidden. And that's kind of an extension of a longer history in Silicon Valley of being interested in right-wing ideas, in eugenics, in all these sorts of things that have been prevalent, since even before the founding of Stanford University, way back when, right? But Silicon Valley did have this kind of image of itself, especially in the post-internet era, of being kind of liberal, right? Because this was the tech place; it was in San Francisco. All these tech workers were supporting Democrats and stuff like that. And the idea was that kind of extended to the upper kind of management of these companies as well, right? But I think what we've seen more recently is that on one hand, these kind of CEOs were more than happy to do that when they perceived that it was in their interest to do that. And they also weren't kind of the Goliaths that they are now, right? The tech companies really took off in the 2010s and became massive in a way that they weren't so much before that. So that changes their kind of position in society and the power that they hold and kind of potentially the politics and the policies that they would want to support as a result, right? What works for them. So naturally that kind of shifts the dynamics there. But I think that these people in the tech industry have always had right-wing inclinations. And now, because of the kind of criticism that they've received after 2016 and 2018, when kind of the narrative really shifted on the tech companies from these are really positive forces in society to, maybe we need to be looking more critically at what they are doing in our society, then they were not held up, but were now criticized. And that pushed them, I think, even further toward embracing the right, toward embracing kind of a right-wing politics, and toward wanting to oppose kind of government intervention on a much larger scale, unless, of course, they're subsidizing their business models and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Matt has said this before, that the different political parties, like the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, represent two kind of factions under capitalism. I don't want to, speak for you, Matt, but that's
different coalitions of capital.
Coalitions of capital is how you say it. And it seems to me that it occurs to me as you speak that Silicon Valley has grown to such a degree, tech has grown to such a degree that now it's so financialized and everything is publicly traded, and the need for endless growth is, basically enshrined in the business model, that the leaders of that coalition, they've moved from one coalition to these heads of these publicly traded companies, and now they're just more adequately represented by the Republican Party as well.
Oh, definitely. Think back to the Obama era, right? And when Obama was in office, he came to power, and one of the kind of big narratives of his success was how he had effectively used kind of social media and was this new kind of president who was close to the tech companies. And that was perceived as a good thing, especially kind of a liberal thing, right? Because you weren't close to these old oil companies or, these kind of old, kind of corporate America kind of things. This was the tech industry. This was new. This was fresh. This was hip. This was progressive, right? And so he was very close with them. I'm in Canada, of course, and when you saw Justin Trudeau come to power in 2015, right on the end of Obama's era, it was a similar thing, right? He was close with Google and Facebook. It was important to have those connections, but those things really started to shift right after that moment, right? Around 2016, you have the election of Trump. Before that, you have the Brexit campaign, and there's kind of reporting that says that, Facebook is kind of implicated in this, and, we can debate whether that ever actually happened, but this was the narrative, right? Then in 2016, 2018 in particular, you have the Cambridge Analytica leaks, and that is kind of what pushes a much more critical stance toward the tech industry. And by that point, of course, the companies are also much bigger than they were in kind of the early Obama years and stuff like that, right? So they're now kind of massive companies that have a lot of control, not just in the United States, but around the world. They're kind of perceived as monopolies. And so there's a desire kind of on the part of the Democratic Party, and you see kind of aspects of this within the Republicans, but it's more just focused on kind of social media and kind of censorship and stuff like that. But within the Democrats, there's a growing kind of coalition to say, we need greater antitrust enforcement. We need to be thinking about how we're regulating these companies. And that is not something that Silicon Valley wants to hear. They do not want the government interfering in their business models and what they're doing. And so that also kind of pushes them to, I think that they already had inclinations that they would be closer to the Republican parties, and they want deregulation, and they don't want to see that the government kind of interfering in their business models or enforcing regulations on them or anything like that. But when the Democrats come out and say, instead of subsidizing you and holding you up like we were going to do in the Obama era, now we're looking at kind of holding you to account and regulating you, obviously that leads them to become much more open in their support of the Republican Party and kind of aligning themselves with them, as we've seen, not just with like the Peter Thiels of the world, but Elon Musk, David Sachs, and many of these other folks in these circles.
Yeah, well, that brings me very nicely to my next question, is about this PayPal kind of tree of libertarian weirdos, including David Sachs, Peter Thiel, and then very publicly facing in his insanity is Elon Musk, who, I want to ask you a bit about this Tesla controversy coming out of Reuters in a second, but like, what is your sense of why the PayPal guys are still so enduring? Is it the fact that they were in the business model of banking, which is what essentially all of these guys want to turn social media into? Like, we've been speaking about essentially how Elon wants to make Twitter into a bank, right? And that's the way to the eventual last stop, I guess, for these major companies is how can we milk it for all its money? We're going to do financial transactions. Like, is the fact that they are they so enduring because they were engaging in tech in its purest form of what it would turn into at the outset, which is like direct money to them, basically?
That's a really interesting way to think about it. And I hadn't, really considered it that way before, but it's entirely possible, right? One of the things that happens with the PayPal mafia, as it's referred to, this is kind of a group of people who make a lot of money in PayPal. PayPal is kind of like, the real moment when these people are developing this product is right around kind of the turn of the millennium, right? The late 90s, early 2000s is when this is all happening, early 2000s in particular. And within a few years, this product has kind of grown really quickly, and then it's sold off to eBay. So these people who were involved in kind of, building it and turning it into this really important payment, mechanism on the internet, get cash out really quickly, right? And get hundreds of millions of dollars and stuff like that then they can move on to do other things with. So at this moment when you've had the .com crash, which is what happened in 2000, where kind of the tech industry implodes after the excitement of the late 1990s, because the internet is privatized in 1995, and that leads to a big kind of boom in, internet companies and venture capital and all that sort of stuff. You have the crash in 2000. And so then, there's kind of this difficult moment in Silicon Valley. Where are we getting our money? What is kind of the future going to look like? And so you have these people who come from this kind of successful company that survived the .com crash and that made a lot of money in the process. And now all of a sudden they have all this capital that they can deploy, and that gives them a degree of power in thinking about, what the future of the industry is going to look like. And of course they take different paths, and I'm not going to describe like all the paths that they take, but obviously you have Elon Musk, who kind of has all this cash already, and so then he invests in SpaceX and Tesla, and this is kind of what starts to create the mythology around him of this guy who's going to like save the future and blah blah blah. Whereas Peter Thiel takes that money and he's more of like a venture capitalist and starts investing in a lot of different firms, and so has a lot of influence on these other companies that are coming up. He's an early investor in Facebook, notably, even though he doesn't totally support the model. But it also helps to create this kind of notion, this sort of idea that what you do in order to grow is that you need to lose a lot of money, you need to gain a monopoly position, and this is how you become one of these major tech companies. And so they're very influential in kind of setting that sort of model for what a tech company should be in those early days. One other thing I would mention, which I think is like maybe just an interesting like tidbit about these early PayPal guys, a lot of them are from like South Africa. Like, you know, they had that kind of apartheid experience. Like Peter Thiel's from Germany. His father briefly worked in South Africa when he was a child before they moved to California. Elon Musk, notably, you know, comes from South Africa, has kind of the kind of mining father who helps fund his move to Canada and then to the US. David Sachs, I believe, is South African as well. There's a number of other ones. It's just an interesting coincidence, I think.
It is quite interesting. And
Not sending their best.
Yeah, and it informs a little bit of, like, you mentioned the fixation on eugenics. I was trying to describe this to somebody the other day who was like, well, he can't be a total idiot, right? Elon Musk, like, you know, he founded Tesla, and that's an interesting company. I'm like, no, he was just he bought in, essentially. Yeah. And like, he believes things like, I need to spread my DNA because I am the prime. It's disgusting, I know. I mean, he's repulsive, but
instantly coming out of South Africa,
right?
Concerned with birth rates, and
birth rates, and I have this kind of godlike sperm, basically, that needs to be spread, and my kids won't talk to me, but it's my duty. I mean, the overarching themes are very scary that he really believes in, and he now leads the Twitter /X and is actively destroying it. So there's that.
Totally. And like, you know, he has been pushing these ideas for quite a while, but now that he's in the position where he is, he's very influential in getting a lot of other people to kind of, you know, believe in them as well, or think that we need to be super concerned about population rates and all this kind of stuff. And I think the other piece of that is really important is that this is not like a new thing for him. Julia Black, who used to work at Insider, now I believe she's at The Information, I think. She wrote, she kind of did some investigation into this kind of pronatalism movement that Elon Musk is kind of like a figurehead of, I guess, now. And one of the things that she found in talking to an anonymous source who knew Elon Musk when he was younger was that he was kind of like obsessed with Genghis Khan, and the idea that Genghis Khan had like fathered all these children and his like DNA was still like pervasive within the human population as a result. And like, you know, there's like kind of Jeffrey Epstein vibes there, but Elon Musk was like very interested in this and like liked the idea of kind of spreading his DNA because he believes that intelligence is kind of like inherent, right? And one of the things that he said very clearly is that he thinks smart people, you know, quote unquote smart people, are not having enough children. And so people like him who are very smart need to be having more kids so that like the entire population remains smart.
It remains like, it's just white.
Yeah, you're smart.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
This is the fancy way we're saying it now, huh?
Which is why that was what he said on Tucker's show before he got canned about, you know, some being in favor of the overturning really of Roe v. Wade. But then I would love if the follow-up, you know, for any journalist that wasn't Tucker was like, how do you feel that way in the continent of Africa, for example, right? And I think his answer would have been a little bit different. I wanted to ask you about that Reuters story that did come out, though, about the lies that Tesla has been perpetrating for around a decade, saying that they had been altering the dashboard, basically estimates on mileage. Can you explain that to our audience and how consequential that is or is not?
Yeah, totally. It's a really big story, I think. You know, we'll see if the media picks up on it and the regulators actually follow it because Elon Musk is so good at kind of, you know, evading accountability for anything that he does. But I think I would just say, like you know, to set it up, we've been seeing a growing amount of scrutiny on Tesla from regulators and from the media in the past like year or so, right? Regulators are now demanding that Elon Musk submit, that Tesla submit data on crashes involving autopilot. It's kind of assisted driving system that it says is a self-driving system. And so that has kind of been escalating because they're finding that a lot of these crashes are from Tesla vehicles, you know, the crashes involving these sorts of systems. And it's been subject to a lot more lawsuits recently, including from drivers who have been kind of, who have been in crashes with these systems. And then, of course, earlier this year, there was a report out of Germany about how a lot of people were having a lot of trouble with their Tesla vehicles, but Tesla was making them sign NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, so that they couldn't actually talk about the issues they were having with the vehicles. And so now there's this Reuters investigation that was published last week, I believe. So, everyone would know that when we talk about electric cars and the shift to electric cars, range anxiety is one of the big things that we're always talking about, right? Will my car be able to actually go where I want it to go? Will it die? Will I be able to charge it properly? And one of the things that Tesla has always said is you can trust us because, we have kind of pioneered this model where we have these massive old batteries in our cars that allow our cars to go really far. Sure, they're very resource intensive. Sure, they make the cars really heavy, but, that's the trade-off to get the range that we need. And so what the Reuters investigation found was that for almost a decade, Tesla has been kind of misleading drivers and owners as to the actual range that their vehicles can go by showing a false number on the dashboard, where it says how much range you have left on your vehicle. And then when it gets closer to actually running out, it will shift from the false amount of range that you have to a real marker so that you can, to kind of push you to go charge it up. And the Reuters reports quotes independent investigations that have found that Tesla is kind of the worst for misrepresenting the range that its vehicles can actually deliver, which is a big problem. But then I think what makes it even worse, exactly.
Well, I mean,
exactly.
This is a driver safety issue. Yes, yeah. I'm sorry to cut you off. Go on.
No, but you're completely right, right? And that's not even like the worst part, right? Like that is bad enough. The fact that they are lying to their customers, customers who, let's be clear, are often quite cultish, really believe in Elon Musk and the mission of this company, and he's treating them this way where, the vehicles are known for having very poor quality control, not great service. Now we hear that he's lying to them about how far their vehicles can go. And then, so, they've been doing this for almost a decade. Tesla has obviously been selling more vehicles in recent years. So last year, the Reuters investigation found, they kind of reached a point where they had so many range complaints from drivers that they set up a special team in Nevada to go into all those complaints, to call those customers and say, we've run kind of a remote diagnostic on your car. We find that your battery's actually fine. So we're going to cancel your appointment. So we don't have to bring it in to get it serviced, and we don't need to pay the money to kind of look into it. And, they had kind of goals set for how many appointments they should cancel, and they would celebrate when they hit certain targets for canceled appointments. And so this was something that the company was very clearly doing. And I think one of the worst things that came out of that piece of it, to make it even worse on top of that, you're having trouble with your car. It's not performing as you expected. Now the company is reaching out and canceling your service and saying, actually, everything is fine. But, the Reuters investigation also found that when these people in Nevada were performing these remote diagnostics, if they found that there were other problems with your car that you didn't know about, they were instructed not to tell you about them until you found out yourself, so that you didn't have to come in for a service appointment. Like, I don't know how something like that is not illegal, to be honest.
Yeah, and then what else are we talking about in terms of safety issues? We're talking about the autopilot thing, the self-driving cars that have just been tested on roadways and have killed people. I mean, it's getting to a point where, I mean, I would imagine more things are going to be uncovered just about the product in and of itself, let alone what's been well documented about the union busting, the racial discrimination. It's a complete it's a pastiche of just horrors, basically, is what I'm getting at here.
Totally. And, this is a company that has really been held up because of its association with Elon Musk. And, it was kind of showing us what the future of automobility was going to be. And I think we could have a debate about whether that was actually a good future. And if you look at what all the other automakers are doing now, whether it should be the future of transportation. Of course, we've had that discussion in the past.
People should read your book. That's right behind there, Road to Nowhere. There you go. Good plug.
Yeah. But, so like we have these growing number of stories about the company. As you say, the autopilot software and the self-driving software is an issue that is gaining gaining increasing scrutiny from regulators, and hopefully regulators will follow up on this Reuters story as well. But in addition to that, over the past few years, we've had increasing reports around the quality control on these vehicles. They're not put together very well because the production process has a lot of issues, apparently. There have been reports about issues with some of the key kind of parts in the vehicles and how they can break, much earlier than the expected lifetime of a vehicle, and that these things are kind of much more endemic to a Tesla than other automakers, out there if you're buying a vehicle. And then, of course, you have the lies about the range. And so we're in this moment now where, the governments and kind of society in general is trying to make this push toward electric vehicles. And the question is Tesla going to become one of these kind of central automakers that dominates this transition? Or are we going to reach the point where the amount of scandal and kind of the issues with this company just keep stacking up? Of course, we also had reporting recently that even Tesla drivers are turning on the company because of Elon Musk's recent tweets and his politics and things like that. So does it just reach the point where this company, you can't touch it because the vehicles aren't good, you don't want to be associated with Elon Musk, and you have all these other options from all these other automakers that aren't lying to you to at least the same degree about range and things like that. So maybe you buy them instead. I think it'll be really interesting to see how that develops.
100%. We were going to talk about ChatGPT, but I feel like I want to ask you more about this kind of meta question, no pun intended, about social media. Because it seems to me that, well, first of all, I saw when the verification, pay for model launched at Twitter, right? I saw that Meta was considering some sort of program that was quite similar, aka Facebook, which is incredible to me, given how horrible the rollout has been and how it's been detrimental to the communication of information because of the fake accounts, because of the privileging of the verified right-wing freaks. Like, from an objective perspective, it has made social media, it has made the usage of Twitter much more difficult. But that doesn't really matter to these social media companies. It appears to be. And the question I have for you is social media as we know it basically dead at this point? Have these companies, the legacy ones of Facebook or Twitter, and then Instagram being purchased by Meta, like, have they kind of bumped up against their stated use at its outset to the point that now it's just necessary to milk as much money out of it as humanly possible, and so its utility is basically, one of the last things on some of these bosses' minds. I'm curious what you think of that theory of mine.
Yeah, I wouldn't go as far to say that it's dead, but I think that it's in a moment of transition and like a difficult moment where we're not really sure where everything is going. Obviously we've had Twitter be absolutely pulled apart under Elon Musk's leadership. It was never kind of like the most profitable or biggest company anyway. But he has really driven away the advertisers, implemented this subscription model that is clearly not working. People are not really signing up for it. Just the other day, he allowed people to hide their blue checks, and this was supposed to be the big thing. You can pay to get a blue check, and now you can hide that away because it's such a mark of shame, right?
Yes, as it should be. Yeah,
exactly. So now we need to keep a watch out for who might have long tweets but no blue check, right? So we can figure out who has it. But anyway, so obviously you've had a lot of other platforms kind of launch or gain kind of prominence over the past 6 months or so as people tried to launch competitors to Twitter because, it was clear that people wanted an alternative. I think it's fair to say, I don't need to go into every single one of them, but I think it's fair to say that none of them has really taken the place of Twitter, even though Twitter has declined in that period. Meta has launched Threads, which is positioned as a competitor to that. Again, I don't think that's going to replace Twitter, but it might become another platform where some people are kind of carved off and use that. And I think in particular, Meta is hoping that it will be a place that a lot of of Instagram users use as an additional social network, right? And the goal there is not really to create like, great conversations or great discourse or to educate you about news or anything like that. Meta just pulled news off of its platforms in Canada the other day because, it doesn't want to have to pay news publishers up here. The goal is really just to sell more ads. And I think that is part of the reason why we're seeing social media kind of be pulled apart in this moment, because obviously we had this period where we had these near zero interest rates for a really long period of time that made it easy for these companies to still gain access to capital even if they weren't making big profits. And so that kind of shaped the type of platforms that we had for a really long time as a result of that. Now, as interest rates have risen, that changes the business model and kind of the thinking of these companies. And so they're trying to find new ways to extract profits out of these, as Facebook has experienced difficulty with its ad systems, in part because of rules that were put in place from Apple to restrict the amount of data collection it could do. But then on top of that as well, its user growth is kind of plateaued, right? And so if you can't get more user growth to sell them more ads, you need to find new ways to extract capital from those existing users. But then the other kind of thing on top of all of that is, as we had these traditional social media platforms that we're used to using that are American based, we have the new competitors coming in from China, TikTok in particular, that a lot of people are flocking to, that have a different kind of, model of how they are pushing content on the people, how they're trying to monetize. And so that is also creating difficulties for the American social media companies as they try to figure out how they're going to compete with what is coming next. And especially like as the business model is changing, as everything is in flux. So I don't think social media is going to look the same way as it had before. I don't think it's all going away. But I do think that we're in kind of a moment of change, and what it looks like in the next year or two, I think is going to look a fair bit different from what we're doing right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a coincidence that when social media was, I guess, at its zenith, or when people really kind of more enjoyed using it, it was at that period that you describe where they're trying to bring in users, and then it's not as focused on profit extraction. So anyway, great stuff. Paris Marx, their podcast is called Tech Won't Save Us, and the newsletter is called Disconnect. You can also read the book Road to Nowhere, which is, I believe that we had you on for that. It's great.
Yeah.
So Road to Nowhere, what Silicon Valley gets wrong about the future of transportation. Paris, thank you so much for coming on today. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Always great to chat with you.
Yes, always great. All right. With that, we are going to wrap up the first hour of this program and head into the fun half, which you can get access to if you are a member. Join themajority.report.com. As Matt says, help our, pay our bills. but I don't know why I keep outsourcing it to you.
Matt's begging.
Yeah. Fund our raises.
Shake my hat.
Yes. Speaking of you, though, Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Yeah, Left Reckoning we had actually last night because David Griscom was traveling. We talked to Darna Noor about climate. In the post game for patreon.com/Left Reckoning members, we went deep into Jimmy Dore, who he recently went after a climate activist saying she was fake, that young lady from Generation Z for Change.
Okay. Fake
and
in
it
what
turned
way?
out that, because you actually endorsed Joe Biden, so actually you like imperialism. And that was his argument, even though he said she's with an organization that endorsed Joe Biden in the Sunrise Movement. She wasn't with the Sunrise Movement, and also the Sunrise Movement didn't endorse Joe Biden. They said, all right, we'll try to get him elected, but he obviously wasn't our first choice. They explicitly said this. Anyway, it turned out that Dore had to issue a correction 10 months ago because of the way he tried to correct a different climate activist who was on stage with Bill Gates and said, hey, maybe next time you... And this young lady, 21-year-old woman, got asked as a young representative for younger people on a climate panel, and said billionaires shouldn't exist. And Jimmy played that and said, look, I like what you said, but don't laugh during it.
So he's tone policing.
Yeah, and then
director's note.
And then said that she had won an award from Bill Gates, but she hadn't. She was just asked, and so she had to email him.
Don't let the truth get in the way.
I'm sorry, I'm kind of doing the whole segment here, but it blew me away. She emailed him saying, hey, can you take that video down where you said I got an award from Bill Gates, I'm actually like a critic of all this stuff, and I don't want it. Like, it's bad for my reputation that you're lying about how close I am. And he's like, oh, I'm really sorry. And so they issued the correction. While Kurt Metzger said she had very photogenic hair, I'll leave it to you to ask or to wonder what race she is. And then added a PS to her email where it was thanking him for covering it, even though it was incorrectly. And like, I guess what I'm trying to say is like the dude is a psychopath and also obsessed with young women, climate activists, and it's fucking weird. And him and Kurt Metzger, I'm gonna like keep talking about how weird I find that, because they keep mentioning how maybe I can find it actually for the fun half. We can preview it a little bit, but how like Jimmy's like, isn't it weird that what's her name, Greta Thunberg, hasn't grown since she came like in
That's one of the reasons he said that she was a psyop, is that she doesn't critique the military bases for their emissions,
but also she's the same size.
She is the same size that she was when she came on the scene.
Okay, so first of all, I know a little bit about this. She went through such a severe depression when she was going through puberty that I believe it was due to climate. She spoke about this on Democracy Now! That she lost a ton of weight during that period, and it may have stunted her growth. But either way, I mean, it's
not a psyop. You're saying?
So not a psyop, maybe, but I don't know. But like, what does that have? Is she some sort of alien?
Yeah. What is the?
I don't know.
Is it an orphan situation? Like that? She's really a 45-year-old woman.
But it's also like a 60-year-old guy, like.
Exactly.
Nastily picking on a teenager.
And also, it's that climate correction video. Maybe we'll link to it. But also, like they'd say, like maybe we want younger activists who haven't been corrupted by Bill Gates. They're effing weird.
It's super weird. Okay, well, I'm going to check out that Life Reckoning episode because it sounds totally...
I got really pissed and I called Jimmy Dore drunk, but I stand by that.
Okay, well, I mean, that's well documented. On ESPN, I mean, come on. We interviewed Arian Foster. It was really, really good. He was incredibly thoughtful about the state of the running back market, about college football, the problems behind with that as well. And he spoke a bit about his atheism, what that was like to play in the South, both as a professional and in college at Tennessee, how they reacted to him. And we did a bunch of the other stories as well. YouTube.com/ESPN show. Brandon, hello.
Hello.
Hello. What's happening over on the discourse?
Well, this week we'll be talking about a little award I received from the Bill Gates Foundation and the IMF. I was named Infiltrator of the Year.
Wait, Brandon, have you grown since I last saw you?
Oh, I mean, I have been hitting the gym.
Yeah, in circumference.
Yeah, right. But still, no inches. You're not 10 foot tall since you. So I'm 10 feet tall. So I'm a little surprised. But
it's the horizontal stripes. They make me look wider.
Mm-hmm. Must be. I mean, you say that, but I don't know if I'm gonna believe you. Okay, what's actually happening on the discourse?
I don't know yet, but I'll have an update for you. I hope I get the award. I'm up for it, but I'm being a little presumptuous. But I'll have an update for you on Twitter.
All right. Well,
not for you, Emma, but for the fans who still stick with me.
Yeah, you could just text Emma the update.
Yeah, thank you. So check out the discourse. And Matt Binder is away this week. Check out Scam Economy. Check out Doomed. Leftist Mafia. He's a busy man. Yeah. All right. The number is 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. See white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males.
Psych. Fuck them. Fuck them. Snowflake says what? What? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100.
Can't knock the hustle.
Come on! Fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy! I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on! Come on! Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
Yeah.
We're back. We're just talking about interactions with famous people. I'm not even sure.
The one famous person I've sort of like consciously, I'm sure I've seen others, especially when I was at NYU, but the one that I recognized, because I was telling everybody that I have like lack of confidence. So like even though I recognize somebody, I'm like, I'm not gonna pick him. But I did see Home Alone actor guy.
Oh, Macaulay
Culkin outside of a a comedy thing.
I gotcha.
Whoopi Goldberg might be my best one. I saw her at a restaurant. She was
I've seen Steve Buscemi a bunch of times.
I would probably recognize Buscemi.
I mean, I think the Culkin brothers are very they live in Manhattan, or they live in New York, right? So they're. But
I remember
same with Buscemi. Right?
There was a cigarette smoking circle, and we were all just smoking, and Macaulay Culkin was part of it. And then some asshole had his phone and was trying to do a surreptitious picture.
No.
And it was
they can always tell.
Yeah, exactly. It's like
that.
These people are used to that.
Yes.
Macaulay Culkin will call you out.
Yeah, he will.
He just retreated from the circle. It was very gracious, but sad.
Sad, yeah. All right, well, I'm turning off the voicemail. I'm going to read some IMs, then we'll do some fun clips. Custodial artist, Emma, your first guest today was fantastic and reminded me to ask, did anyone see Netanyahu on Good Morning America last week? Oh my God. He actually said the U.S. Supreme Court overruled an executive order that people wouldn't, imagine if the U.S. Supreme Court overruled an executive order, the people wouldn't stand for it. He made that claim. Well, you don't need to imagine, because the people certainly did stand for it. There haven't been protests in the same way, to be honest with you. God, I can't believe he's allowed to be mainstreamed like that. It's gross, but 2 If by Fire, Greta is Megan. M3 again. 2 If by Fire, Tesla is like a pet rock. Ostensibly leftist. Awesome interview with Azad Essa. Important to recognize Hindutva shares many shares much with other examples of religious extremism, especially far-right Christianity and its way of obscuring scripture and national history. Left is best.
Also,
Yeah.
Tulsi likes him.
Yep. That too. They did yoga together. How fun.
Did you see Tulsi? She's like, oh, you haven't heard of me in a while because I've been on the Horn of Africa fighting Al Qaeda.
Yeah, we know. Oh, that's so anti-war of her.
What an anti-imperialist.
Yeah. Fun half enjoyer. Cornel West doesn't pay his taxes. Jill Stein is his campaign manager. How are people taking this campaign seriously at this point?
It's an idea, a message campaign.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the tax stuff, even though I think Cornell's politics and are probably best in, I think definitely best in like the field. I think it might explain why he's doing things like the masterclass stuff, or maybe even the DeSantis thing. It's because people got bills to pay.
James from Houston went to a baseball game for the first time in like a decade to see Valdez get a no-hitter. Got baseball and boxing on my sports I care about list. Very cool. Oh, Valdez, the Astros pitcher, right? Is that the guy? Yeah, I saw a clip of that. That
Framber Valdez.
Is he the guy that had the 14 strikeouts in the?
Yeah, and it was also it was the least amount of pitches in a no hitter since like 1999. It was under 100, it was like very like surgical. He basically gave up one walk.
And the last pitch was like I guess they hit it out to the shortstop, and you were just like holding your breath to see if he catches it in the air. But anyway.
The last baseball comment, but last night I don't think it was that pitcher. There's a different pitcher who had his first debut in the playoffs and had like 14 strikeouts, but it made me go back and watch the Kerry Wood 20 strikeout game in 1998, and they have
classic.
Kerry Wood talking about it, and he was like just a 20-year-old, and it is a wild thing to like revisit, because I remember my dad was a big Cubs fan and how big of a moment that was. Very cool.
Yeah, it's as they say in the Moneyball, it's hard not to be romantic about baseball. There is those romantic moments, but I will say, if you guys are sports fans at all, watch the quarterback series on Netflix.
Oh yeah, it's very entertaining, very fun.
So good. And Patrick Mahomes is just like probably the greatest player in the history of the NFL already, and it's like a gift to be able to get into his process. So I couldn't encourage it more. If people want to check that out. Iowan Ryan, Matt Binder was on Iowa Public Radio last week. He did a great job talking about crypto. That's awesome. Starstruck, speaking of citing famous people, my wife and I see Sam Seder and Emma Vigeland around Brooklyn all the time, but we're too starstruck to say anything. That's very sweet. You can say stuff to me, but you know.
Sometimes it's hard. I got recognized actually recently. I don't mind. I actually like it. The only time like I feel bad when like because look, walking down Brooklyn, you get solicited for a lot of different reasons. So often it's hard to tell if someone's like going to ask you to sign something or buy something.
Yeah, I mean, I have my headphones in, so I feel like I miss people all the time. And like, it's those AirPods, so people don't even see that they're in, and I feel like I've been accidentally rude a bunch of times.
Yeah.
And yeah, that noise cancellation really works. GG Grace, I imagine you'll save it for tomorrow, but Sam is in Steven Crowder's promo. Yeah.
Oh, really?
I think so, right?
Steven Crowder's promo?
That ad, right? We have it on the sound sheet, but I
haven't
think
seen this.
We'll wait for
Why would he
Sam.
do that? That seems ill-advised.
I don't know. Let's do some.
All right, bring it on, boy.
Let's do some clips here, shall we? All right, let's just go right into Rogan, I think.
Oh.
So Joe Rogan had
famous last words.
Yeah. Joe Rogan had Jim Gaffigan on his show. And I mean, that's not really relevant, except that's just the other voice that you're hearing here.
He's like, yeah, false flag, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he tries to push back slightly. I can't put this on Gaffigan.
Yeah, Gaffigan gets a pass. He gets the hot pocket pass.
I can't imagine like watching Joe Rogan's show. It's just like so inconsistent. It's just like he has three types of guests on, like comedians you remember from Netflix comedy specials from like 10 years ago. No shade, they're all good comedians. Like, who doesn't love Bill Burr? Like insane people, just like literal people who come on and go like, I think vaccines are poison, and then like every so often he'll have one like Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's the thing is like it's so depressing that this guy has been basically elevated to squat the intersection of like masculinity and curiosity.
Yes.
And so like people be like, oh yeah, we hear all this interesting stuff like Neil deGrasse Tyson. Yeah, but you also hear 3 hours of like Douglas Murray and all these other like freaks that are preoccupied with like wokeness and stuff like that.
Yeah, but you could also just like read stuff about astrophysics or watch stuff specifically about that.
But that's harder. Yeah. What he does is he provides like these kinds of people who nominally have credentials, right? And then you can list them. But when you dig deep, they're just all providing counter narratives, meaning it's pseudoscience.
Yeah. He lets his audience pretend they're intellectually curious just by like watching his show.
And then, I mean, all those 3 guest examples, though, that you list, Brandon, are kind of better alternatives than him just going freestyle like he does here, because it got him, I think, in a little bit of hot water when he said that, or claimed to have personal, someone he knows personally tell him about kitty litter boxes in schools and children identifying as cats, which ended up like getting him a little bit in trouble with his Spotify corporate overlords, because like that's just made up. And this also might get him in trouble. This is him talking about January 6th, and specifically he references Ray Epps, who is currently suing Fox News for defamation for making claims like this.
I think the January 6th thing is pretty bad.
Well, the January 6th thing is bad, but also the intelligence agencies were involved.
This is actually such a distilled essence of what Rogan's purpose is now.
Mm-hmm.
It's to like, people have like accurate conclusions. Like January 6th is bad. Yeah, bro, but you know what? Actually, it's like, you know what I would say if I was doing this thing about like, you know what's like actually the problem is maybe with the FBI and how they didn't act as if like there was a BLM protest. Like they did half the security of like a typical like protest after a cop kills somebody.
Yeah.
If you're interested, go ahead.
No, continue.
I was gonna say, if you're interested in the FBI entrapping people into crimes they otherwise wouldn't commit, there's a long list of like Muslim teenagers with intellectual disabilities that you can go down, which has formed like the basis of all FBI counterterrorism statistics in America for like the past 20 years.
Yeah, this century.
Or like eco groups, right? Like, they've only become interested in this kind of entrapment now that they imagine it's used against them.
They did it in Black Lives Matter protests. We had Trevor Aronson on, a journalist who's documenting this in a podcast that's actually informative called Alphabet Boys. So that's the reality of entrapment, as you say, Brandon, like in terms of what the FBI is doing. But let's just go back to the beginning, because I just like the titular butt from Rogan in response to an uncontroversial statement by his guest.
Yeah, and just one more citation before I switch over. I helped destroy people. This is the Terry Albury, was the former FBI agent who whistle blew about how he was just like following Muslims around Minneapolis for the post 9/11 period.
Yeah.
I think the January 6th thing is pretty bad.
Well, the January 6th thing is bad, but also the intelligence agencies were involved in provoking people to go into the Capitol building. That's a fact.
Nope.
So wait a minute. You're saying that guy,
like the president,
what's his name?
Ray Epps.
Yeah, you really think that he?
I don't know, but I do know that every
other pretty
other
apparent. I think he's going to sue Fox.
I think every other person who was involved in January 6th, who was involved in coordinating a break-in into the Capitol and in instigating people breaking, they were all arrested. This guy wasn't. Not only that, they were defending him in the New York Times, the Washington Post, all these different things, because saying that Fox News is unjustly accused him of instigating. Well, he clearly instigated. He did it on camera. I don't know if he was a Fed. I know a lot of people think he was a Fed. The people that were there.
But we have to pause on that. Like one guy instigated all these hogs as opposed to was like just participating in all this stuff. Like, I'm glad that Joe Rogan and all these guys want to see every last person prosecuted, even no matter how much they like cooperate with authorities or whatever. But like that's just like not. That's just like not a realistic.
There are other people who were there on January 6th who haven't been arrested. Is he accusing them of being a Fed, or is he just doing this because like QAnon saw him whispering in one photo and they decided, oh, let's make an entire conspiracy theory about this guy who was, I mean, a Tucker Carlson watching member of the Oath Keepers who voted for Trump twice. The idea that he's some sort of federal agent is hilarious.
Yeah, and like this is from the July 13th, and again, like I don't follow all this stuff super closely, but like Ray Epps should be criminally charged for events on January 6th, as the attorney says. An attorney for Ray Epps, man seen wearing blah blah blah, says his client has been informed by federal law enforcement officials that they intend to charge him in connection with events that day. So like, what are we even talking about?
Yeah. Go ahead, Brandon.
No, I mean, I just think it's amazing that like Fox News and a lot of these outlets are clearly crossing a line when it comes to targeting private citizens just for clout. And I think it's, it's sad that we've gotten to this place with online and even mainstream content creation where they feel comfortable targeting private citizens for like internet videos who, they're still allowed their due process, as we're constantly reminded of by right wingers, how important due process is. And it's clear that they just feel like there's no consequences for this kind of witch hunt leading, even though they will often accuse the left of it, of engaging in like cancel culture, when stuff like this is the stuff that's clearly going to get you in trouble with like a civil like defamation case, like implying that someone is a federal officer, implying that somebody has committed a crime, or really just saying it like online or on your platform. And it's clear that I think a lot of the past 5, 6, maybe, more years online has been concerned with these informal sanctions for like, essentially harassing people online using your platform. And now they're finally starting to bring down like these formal, I'm taking Alex Jones to court, I'm taking Fox News to court, I have the money, I'm going to see you in court. And it's clear they've never conceived of this as a real possibility outside of just like, the only consequences for me is that I might lose my channel or have my like account banned for a few weeks on Twitter. And it's amazing to see, like, I think online has become way too real for some people.
Well, I think the corporate media that owns that owns Joe Rogan's program, Spotify, paid $200 million for it, might be a little bit upset to hear about this kind of meandering, pontificating on Rogan's program, given the fact that Epps' defamation lawsuit against Fox seems pretty open and shut.
Yeah, I mean, let's be clear. I have a big heart. I'm able to open it up and be sympathetic to propagandized Trumpers who were misled into the Capitol. To the extent, like, when I actually am able to care about that, the people that I blame, the sort of positions of authority, the connected to the government people that I blame are, for instance, Donald Trump and the co-conspirators mentioned that were counted on the Insurrection Act. They looked at these people like fodder. And so like Glenn Greenwald can act with his crocodile tears about Ashley Babbitt all he wants, but the truth is Ashley Babbitt was killed by the people who lied about this election. And all these people, including Glenn, cannot actually be direct about that. It's this, every little voter restriction could go into voter suppression, but you know what? The liberals are being... No, man.
It's all about liberal vibes.
Exactly. And,
as opposed to substantive lies.
Those people were... And some of them absolutely knew that it was just a pretense. But to the extent that you're cared about people propagandized into it, you... to focus on like these peripheral guys instead of the actual people at the head of the party is I mean, not worth taking seriously. It should be treated with contempt.
Well, yeah, and it's also about, like you said, it's about pointing the finger away from the content creators of variety of platforms who are actually instigating or like doing, anti-vaxxer propaganda, stop the steal propaganda. It's about removing the accountability from those people because they're just sharing their views and putting them onto some sort of nebulous deep state that can, pop up whenever you need a convenient scapegoat. Like, if we're looking for people who instigated this, like, how can you be a bigger instigator than the President of the United States of America?
Nope. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they exist to defend and obscure that. And that's why Robbie Soav, all these libertarians, they exist to protect that.
Let's keep going.
Justly accused him of instigating. Well, he clearly instigated. He did it on camera. I don't know if he was a Fed. I know a lot of people think he was a Fed. The people that were there were calling him a Fed. What I do know is when they asked the FBI, the FBI said, we can't tell you whether or not there were people that were there that were doing that. Now, there's been reports that there was hundreds of agents that were there that were doing that. I don't know if that's true either. But I do know that they do use agent provocateurs to disrupt peaceful protests. It's a common tactic. What they do is say if there's a like the World Trade Organization is a great example, and that was in I think the 90s in Seattle. And so what they did was
no,
they
give
were
him more.
protesting.
Actually, again, chicken shit. This is how you know that this guy has consciousness about who he's appealing to. The most recent example, Jamie, look this up, is what I just referenced. The Black Lives Matter protesters. That is proven at this point. Listen to the Alphabet Boys podcast. Listen to the reporting on that front. They did that. They hire the FBI field office in Denver. I want to make sure I'm getting the facts right here, but Bradley, if you don't mind looking up the details of that. The FBI field office in Denver was involved in getting this known criminal, Mickey whatever, to provoke violence at Black Lives Matter protests. That's exactly true, but he doesn't cite that example because his audience is not going to be happy to hear about that.
Also, those people need to be monitored, so it doesn't count.
Yeah, Dakota Access Pipeline protester Red Fawn Fallis, a gun was planted on her by an FBI informant.
Yeah.
The FBI recruited Mickey
seduced
Windeck.
her, right?
Who seduced her and appeared as just a. So this does happen, and this sort of like using that reality, which these people do never want to actually wrestle with when it affects the left. They're just completely oblivious about it. To use that to excuse and sort of obscure the reality that there is a violent reaction in this country, I think is ludicrous. And it's funny because like they'll deny this. This is actually a very interesting thing. They deny like the seriousness of Jan 6, yet Glenn Greenwald is out there yesterday saying, hey, these people will riot if they don't get what they want. Yeah, we know, Glenn.
Yes, that's the seriousness. Okay, so from Bradley, per CBS News here, thank you for looking this up. The FBI recruited Michael Mickey Windecker, a violent felon with sexual assault conviction, and paid him tens of thousands of dollars during the summer of 2020 to pose as a racial justice activist. There we go. So let's see. Maybe he'll cite that example. Let's go.
What they do is say if there's a like the World Trade Organization is a great example, and that was in I think the 90s in Seattle. And so what they did was they were protesting the World Trade Organization. They were doing it peacefully. It was a big problem. So what they did is they sent in, allegedly, agent provocateurs. They started smashing buildings and lighting things on fire. Now it's not a peaceful protest. Now they can bring in the police. Now they can start arresting people. And then they created a no protest zone where literally if you had a pin on your jacket that was the WTO with a red line through it, they would not let you cross. You could not cross with a pin that was against the WTO and go to work. There was a no protest zone. So they silenced protest, which is a part of our freedom of speech. So this is a tactic that some government agencies use to stop peaceful protest.
I wish the World Trade protests were as aggressive as Jan 6. We might be living in a different world, but continue, Joe.
So they silenced protest, which is a part of our freedom of speech. So this is a tactic that some government agencies use to stop
but wait a minute.
protest.
All right, so what you're saying is on January 6th, that this event that obviously Trump organized, forget about the Giuliani stuff and the
big Afghan
whether
W
they
here.
thought that it was
He definitely
stolen.
encouraged people to protest.
Yes. But all right, so you're saying that like
Definitely.
the FBI and Nancy Pelosi and I'm
not saying Nancy
Pelosi.
Pelosi.
No, but like you're saying that like they're like we'll make this instead of an awkward protest, we'll encourage it so that it'll backfire on Trump rather than being this rising of people that believe that there was election corruption.
I think it's certainly
I think
possible.
that would be hard. Do you
Great
think
question.
it's possible?
Great
I think
question,
it's
Jim.
possible.
You don't think it's wait a minute? You think it's hard to do?
I think that that
Doesn't make
the
sense.
FBI or the CIA saying, hey, Trump lost this election, because here's what you're kind of implying.
Get on our show.
Trump lost the election. He is such an amazing communicator, and he's convinced this loyal base that there was election interference. We don't want them to protest. How we can end this is if we encourage people to go beyond protesting to essentially go into the Capitol and take a shit in the hallway. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit.
Yeah.
But like, I don't see why that would be of use. Like, I'm more suspicious why Trump didn't call for backup when
Okay.
you know, or for the Capitol Police. You know what I mean? It's like there was, and that like Michael Flynn's brother was, you know what I mean? Like there's way more conspiracy stuff against Trump, and then I
because
think
he's the one that did the conspiracy.
I just want to hear the response of Rogan, and then we'll wrap up here. Just because, like, God bless you, Jim Gaffigan, but yes, if you could just skip to it, yeah.
He loves to confront like normal guests with like the craziest conspiracy theory that he could possibly think of, and then this is a good example of why that doesn't work on like normal people, because they just go like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Like, what's the why would they go through to such obscure and esoteric methods to achieve such like ludicrously unhelpful ends? But that's like classic conspiracy brain. Like, of course they would, and they left clues everywhere.
Right.
All right, let's hear what he says.
So that we can arrest 300 people. Does that make sense?
No, it doesn't make sense. No, I think it's a standard tactic, especially when someone is the enemy of the intelligence agencies. With Trump, that's absolutely the case. Trump set himself up against the intelligence agencies. He did it openly, and he did it brazenly. And a lot of people think it's very dangerous. Like, the intelligence agencies are very important. You want to find out what's going on in other countries.
All right, let's just pause
you want to find out
because this is just drivel. But the point is, like, he's opening up himself up for litigation, and it's the guy who pretends that he's challenging the powerful has seemingly no understanding of who the intelligence agencies really are after, and they have an ideological tilt towards Republicans that's well documented.
Yeah, and this is the difficult part about like incredibly well-platformed conspiracy theorists, is because they have that little nugget of truth that, like, yes, obviously intelligence agencies are well documented to infiltrate various, political groups for, as long as they've existed, both the political groups and the intelligence agencies, obviously. Yeah. And the right likes to selectively acknowledge stuff like prison brutality or like the overzealousness of our prosecutors, and they'll make fun of it, or they will like make light of it, or say other populations deserve it when it happens to them 99.99% of the time, and then they'll dare you to not cater to whatever narrative they're trying to put forth that happens to acknowledge a tiny sliver of the prison industrial complex or the military industrial complex, because some people are just so glad that for once Joe Rogan's talking about like COINTELPRO, and you're like, oh my God, like he knows. Like, of course they know, they're just bigots. They just think it's good when it happens to BLM people, and that it's bad when it happens to Jan 6ers, and they have to twist themselves into pretzels to make that seem like not just a bigoted statement, but it's just obvious by the things they choose to highlight.
It's an extension of like their anti-tech argument. They really don't care about big tech. They just want their kind of guys leading it.
I'm a big CIA critic. Actually, the guy that the CIA is very afraid of, and I'm president now. Here's my first CIA director, Mike Pompeo. Here's my second CIA director, Gina Haspel. CIA
Torture queen.
CIA hates me.
Yep. Pathetic. Dumb. All right, let's take a call. Calling from a 608 area code. 608.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can, but I think you're on speaker, so if you could just take us off, that would be lovely.
Yeah, give me 1 second. I'm sorry, guys.
It's okay.
I was driving.
All good.
Making a turn, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Glad you signal. Important.
All right, well,
you got to follow the rules of a small town. Sorry, I'm switching right now.
Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Ian from Watertown, Wisconsin.
Ian from Watertown, Wisconsin. What's on your mind?
I'm sorry, I can't get this thing to switch.
It's okay. You sound okay. You sound okay. So.
Okay, I'm sorry about the confusion. So I used to work for a company that was introducing electric cars to a new customer base in the distant past. And I'm not calling to defend Tesla, but I worked for a team that was similar to what is described in that story.
Okay.
We never went as far as to like dismiss people's concerns or try to cover up inadequacies of the car. But there is something to the range anxiety that people feel that you just have a segment of the customers that will not listen when you try to explain how the car works to them and what they need to do to change their driving habits to get the range working in their benefit.
Yeah.
And it's very similar to like when you have a internal combustion engine car, that shows you a fuel range, but that is an estimate that the car is using from your past driving habits to tell you how much you might have left in the tank and how far you might go, but it's never going to be exactly on point. So,
right, but the point though is that he literally that it was manipulated to lie, as opposed to it being imprecise in a way that like is in good faith with the way that the car is constructed.
Right, and I sat through many a phone call of being accused of that, and we did what we could to try and get those people into the dealerships and get the technicians to look at the cars, but there does come a point with some of those customers where you have to wash your hands of it because you can't make them happy.
I mean,
so
I hear you, Ian. I hear you, but the thing is that like this is the like 40th example of Tesla being. I mean.
Yeah, I that's just like something that
corners
you have to live with as somebody who produces vehicles. Like people are
right
because otherwise we have a society where the Pinto gets out here and it's just blowing up on people. Like I think like that's what the money's for.
Okay, I just wanted to put that out there in case you were interested, because it's like I say. I mean, when you get into the we are going to like give you prizes for this. Getting the customer out of the pool, that's another thing. But there are instances where the customer is just not responding to any help you give them. So yeah. I just wanted to put that out there. I thought you might find it interesting.
All right, thanks, Ian.
I definitely agree. I think as somebody who deals with customers, the customer can't always be right. I think what the article showed, though, that there was a systemic and targeted effort to make sure that people who were reporting a very specific problem that they were anticipating were ignored because they knew what the problem actually was. And if it was range anxiety, it seems like Elon Musk gave it to people by like telling them it worked a certain way, and then it wasn't. I mean, they've already been fined for this in certain countries who take that stuff seriously. And so like there just was an expectation ostensibly coming from his words, which I know taking Elon Musk at his word can be, taking your own life into your hands apparently. But, I think you can only give him so many passes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
For so many features that aren't the way he describes them as.
Absolutely. Courier 11 Sec says Joe Rogan and Tim Pool in a classic unending struggle over title of dumbest guy in possession of a microphone. Sam's Fifi says, I was watching Sam's debate yesterday with Forgettable Bootlicker, and when Sam talked about how successful Connecticut's carceral reform was in lowering crime rates, Bro pointed out that the clearance rate got worse. But dude also said that violent crimes were easier to solve. If those crimes are easier to solve, drop by 40%. If the crimes that are easier to solve drop by 40%, wouldn't a drop in clearance rates make sense? That's not a downside. It's math. I didn't see the debate.
Oh, yeah. That is an interesting point, though.
Yeah.
The George Floyd effect. I mean, it's everyone's talking about.
So, yeah, I did see a little, basically, that he was just drawing conclusions about crime from the George Floyd protests as opposed to COVID.
There's nothing else.
Wow, what could be the undertones there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could have been responded to by correlation is not causation, and it might be saying more about you, about the things you're anxious about, than what's actually driving these things.
Yes. I did see that he said I was not a pedophile, though, so I'm appreciative.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting that's the conclusion.
Could have said that maybe.
To Tim?
Yeah.
Well, Tim didn't call me a pedophile until after I left.
Oh, fair enough.
Didn't really have the guts to do it to my face. So thanks, actual Justice Warrior, for clearing that part up.
Oh, I thought like Regrettable Bootlicker was like an actual like YouTuber, because they all have like names like that, like most irrational skeptic, and you're like, oh God, just kill me.
I know, but Regrettable Bootlicker would be a little bit too accurate of a moniker, right?
I don't know. Matt Walsh calls himself a Christo-fascist. I mean, ironically, but you never know. Their sense of humor is beyond me.
Yeah. El Conipcion, the FBI uses agent provocateurs at protests, is word-for-word milquetoast lines Rogan ripped directly from Alex Jones. That is ubiquitously true enough to be used in service of any argument to an unwitting audience.
Yeah.
You know, Joe Rogan is kind of reaching that point where he's like Alex Jones level, where if you're just, and this is not an allegation, but if you were to be picking who the deep state would be using to sow disinformation, why would you pick an on the ground person and not just like a high up platformed disinformation artist such as a Joe Rogan or an Alex Jones?
And
like they fit that profile a lot better than any individual, like as part of a protest, as you know, a far right protest at least.
And the agent provocateur thing, like, there's a qualitative difference between an agent FBI agent being unmasked at, say, a BLM or an environmental protest, and it turning out that a guy in a right-wing protest is an FBI agent. Because guess what? Those motherfuckers believe the dumb shit. Like,
there were a lot of cops there. That's
exactly.
for sure.
Yeah.
they weren't on the clock though.
Yeah, they support the coup and they believe the dumb shit. They're exactly who Glenn's talking about when they're saying, "Hey, some people don't trust institutions." Yeah, it's the cops, and they like that's who is in there. So like, yeah, it's not positive of some sort of Hillary Clinton operation that like FBI agents, like, because FBI agents read Breitbart, they don't watch MSNBC.
Yes. Let's talk more about. Let's do more of this January 6th stuff. Which one should we do, Gutfeld or Waters? What are you thinking, Bradley? Jesse. Okay. Jesse Waters, he's still doing double duty because I guess like they need to promote him at the 8 o'clock hour in replacement of Tucker. So he's on the 5 still, which I'm sure he's just exhausted, spewing out all that propaganda on 2 different platforms. This is him reacting to the Trump indictment, and he compares January 6th to some, or he responds to I guess this is a straw man about what people are comparing January 6th to. Oh no, he makes the comparison.
Do both, yeah.
Oh boy,
it's like a negative. He's basically saying no one sees January 6th the way some hysterical people might characterize.
Oh, hysterical liberals. Gotcha. Okay.
And then I'll speak for the rest of the country that has their head on straight. Not everybody believes January 6th was Hiroshima. Not everybody believes that.
No one.
We talk to people on the street all the time. A lot of people don't even know what January 6th was. Okay. And for the people that watch it on TV, they're over it. They don't see it as a holy day the way you guys do. Again, the documents case. And I'm talking about what Biden did with it, what Trump did with it. Regular Americans on Main Street aren't fussing over where the documents went. They really don't care. It doesn't affect them. In the 90s, you had sex. It was titillating. People were very focused on it. It was a different culture back then, okay? If you find cash bribes that go into Biden's offshore bank accounts, that's going to light up the country. That is a cash bribe from a foreign company that's in the bank account. Goodbye, okay? Sex and cash bribes, that's going to do it. Documents and January 6th, it's not going to do it. You have another thing.
Do what?
Greg said it. This is like lawfare, they call it. Legal warfare.
Oh, hell yeah.
If this was political, this would be like a political war crime. This is overkill. This is political germ warfare. These are political war crimes. It's an atrocity. It's like not just dropping one atomic bomb.
He's really just
drop
Oppenheimer.
15 dozen, Jessica. Enough is enough.
So
this is the establishment terrified of Donald Trump's reelection.
This is perfect because they always like try to act like the libs are the ones that are catastrophizing it. Like nobody's saying it was Hiroshima, except it was Hiroshima except for us.
Yes.
You know, we're the Japanese.
We 200,000 people dead, elementary schools completely eviscerated, children incinerated. That's what's happened here to us, though.
And
to us.
And to be clear, 15 times 12 is 180. So he's saying that whatever Trump being indicted this way is an equivalent to 180 atomic bombs.
Oh, so like the end of the planet.
The end of the world. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like a literal apocalyptic event is what this is equivalent
But
to.
that's what I'm saying. I am pretty much the American Lula da Silva. This is a deep state operation. They don't like that I speak for the people, that I'm against the security state, and they're trying to go after me. They're trying to lock me up, but they're not going to do it, because if they can lock me up, they can lock you up.
Everyone saying Lula Libre.
I just
Trump
I just
Libre.
feel like evil David Schwimmer. I can't remember. No, Jesse Waters. Is not as good of a messenger of this kind of like dismissive, like it's a nothing burger, as like Tucker Carlson is. Like, I know this is not in Tucker Carlson's like,
He doesn't have the
favorite
juice
number.
like Tucker does. No,
No,
like,
no,
on Fox.
Tucker Carlson has that like way of talking that's like, you really believe this happened? You
Yeah.
know, it's not
The
like Jesse, like,
condescension
Yeah.
of a Swanson for food heir is what Tucker possesses.
Like,
right?
I almost think the benefit to Tucker is that he somehow still, while trying to appeal to like the masses, so to speak, continues to possess the cosmopolitan condescension that's actually part of him.
It's William F. Buckley.
Right,
That's what
right.
he's trying
it's
to do.
It's sort of the Buckley vein of rhetoric. Waters is like an actual like hose down Trinity frat boy. Like,
yeah, he's so manic when he's yelling about it. Like, he's just like, screw, this is nothing, and you're like, okay,
please believe me.
And if you guys thought that Fox News learned the lesson about the election lies, let's be clear
Oh,
here.
no.
They are going to continue to do election lies if it doesn't implicate a corporate entity like Dominion, or it does not disparage somebody who might be litigious against them like Ray Epps. So he'll be as hysterical as possible. And that is just like to Matt's point at the beginning. January 6th was not like Hiroshima. How silly are the liberals? It was actually like 100 or 15 dozen of Hiroshimas, and not the part that was a coup attempt, but the prosecution of the person attempting to do the coup. That's the one. That's the atomic bomb 15 dozen times over.
He also
But libs are hysterical. Go on.
He also implies that it's kind of okay to commit crimes if no one seems to care about them. Like, that was kind of his point too, where he was just like, no one cares except for liberals, but no one but liberals care that, Trump might have been stealing documents and hiding them in his bathroom, or may have been coordinating an insurrection. No one cares about that except for liberals. So we shouldn't try. Like, that's not how the law works.
Yeah.
Come on. I thought we were a nation of laws.
Well, he said it was a law war or warfare through the law.
Lawfare.
And I also just love how he's like the theoretical bribe that Biden received, which we have no evidence for. That's going to be the thing that sets people ablaze, because there wasn't like dozens or if not hundreds of examples of that literally happening during the Trump administration. And, yes, liberals were upset about it, but nothing really came of it for Trump.
Yeah, I mean, it really gives the game away, because I will point to like our coverage of, say, like a person like Jared Kushner or Ivanka and their like petty corruption stuff, and the entire time that Trump was in office, like, it was fun to talk about, but I think we would always stress like this is not actually really where the game is.
Yeah.
But yet you have, and Jared Kushner was put in charge of Middle East peace.
Mm-hmm.
And
Netanyahu
meanwhile,
slept in his bedroom.
Yeah, and like I think it's correct to like, okay, you can note on the corruption stuff, but like don't get lost in the weeds on that, because that actually is like how like lawfare stuff happens. And then you have people like Greenwald and Taibbi hyperventilating about the Hunter Biden story, acting like resistance liberals did during about the Kushner and Ivanka stuff. Like, basically this is selling us out, and this is where the real story is here.
And
it
I'm
proves
sorry
everything.
though, like the Hunter Biden stuff is not equivalent in dollar value
Of
to
course, yeah.
anything. I mean, again, Kushner, he got a $2 billion investment right after
immediately
after Trump left office into one of the properties. Let's be real here.
Yeah, exactly.
I also really love the idea from Waters that the January 6th and the documents of like possessing illegally possessing classified documents and like an actual like riot on the Capitol are not super interesting, or almost kind of like bland and like kind of unentertaining.
Yeah.
But like this like Russian nesting doll snake eating its own tail of like shell companies and like different like Romania, China, Ukraine, like the shell companies, like the Biden it's like there's not actually like, I don't know what the crime is.
Yeah.
I don't know what They keep saying influence peddling. They keep saying money from shell companies. They say this is sexier. This is more entertaining. This is more gripping. I don't even know what they're actually fully alleging that Joe Biden
don't know.
did.
Comer said that that's what they'll find out when he was asked what the crime is. They don't know.
Right. It's like I just find it amazing that this defense is that's more sensational when it's literally not even a fully formed conspiracy yet.
Yes.
Well, I mean, they have hunter derangement syndrome because you hate to say it, you hate to borrow their own language, but when they're like combing through all of his dick pics, they're imagining that everyone else is so much more concerned with this, even as they, as an institution, the Fox News, the Republican Party, has tried to make corruption of this type as like commonplace as possible within their party. Democrats the same. They're trying to convince you that this is like now something that is the most scandalous thing. Their ability to like whip their own fans into a moral panic is quite admirable, but like the rest of people are just like, come on, this is way too obscure. It was like a Jason Bourne novel. No one's watching
Well, no,
this.
they just are titillated by it, and they think that. I mean, it's funny that he brought up Monica Lewinsky and Bill Clinton there. It's just like everyone has to be victim of the right wing's like fixation on other people's sex lives.
They haven't found like a candid picture of someone else's genitals that they don't want to save to their phone yet, and then show to all their friends. So I get it, but I just don't think it plays well.
I agree. I would happen to agree with that. All right, let's take another call here. Calling from a 708 area code. Who's this person? Oh my God. I hear myself. Echo.
Hey there. This is Steve Areno from Frisco Bay.
It's who?
Steve Areno.
Okay. From the Bay. Frisco Bay. Gotcha.
Yeah. I just wanted to call in, bring up two topics. The first of which was just a clip that I emailed a couple days ago that I think fits into the interview you did with Paris Marx earlier really well. And this was a video by Gary Tan. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's the president of Y Combinator. It's like a startup accelerator. And in the video, I think it's called like The Truth and Lies of Driverless Cars in SF. And he pretty much, starts off saying, oh, San Francisco is the, greatest, most tech-savvy place in the world where all innovation comes in, and just kind of goes on a tirade, and it essentially ends with him calling, making targets against a few of the SF Board of Supervisors, like 5 of them, 5 of the 11, and they're all like the, progressive, radical leftists. So it's essentially, a way to just obfuscate his political ambition of, getting rid of regulation on self-driving cars in the Bay.
All right, we'll check that out. You sent that to Majority Reporters?
I sent it to the, I think it was producers at Majority.fm.
All right, we'll check that out.
Cool.
Thanks for the heads up. What was the second thing you wanted to say?
Yeah, so this is, I've been in the Bay Area for a little bit, and so, some of the culture out here is just wild in terms of, startups and VCs. Just wanted to give like a really quick story about one of my experiences out here.
Sure.
So I became a co-founder for a biotech startup for a bit, and during that process, we got, invited to a retreat by one of our investors, out in the middle of the wilderness up in Northern California. It's a really nice, visual place, but like during there, it's kind of, 4 days of, you go to like these classes, if you will, that are run by all the other, startup founders and whatnot. And just through that experience, I was talking with them, I was kind of agreeing to this whole Silicon Valley culture thing at the time. And there was one conversation that I thought was I think indicative of just kind of the self-aggrandizing that you see out here. And there's a company that was trying to, extend life, longevity and all that stuff, which is a whole nother thing. But I was talking with the CEO of it, and she was saying like, yeah, we're going to make people live to be 200. And I was like, all right, well, if we're talking about who's going to be able to live to 200, it's just going to be, rich people who can afford whatever service that you're providing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what struck me as her response was, well, no, like, it'll be my technology. I'll get to decide, who gets to use it. I'll get to decide who lives and who dies. And like that right there, just like, oh God, like this is what all these people believe.
Welcome to Silicon Valley.
It's just a cult.
Well, it's like the Theranos kind of, we're doing this to save the world through smart capitalism.
I mean, that was for a grift, though. This sounds like it's a will to power over life and death.
Well, I mean...
I mean, how many of those crypto people have come out and said that they were trying to start like weird private islands where they were going to do like genetic experiments? I know it was like Sam Bankman-Fried's brother. Wanted to buy
altruists or whatever the fuck they're called.
Altruists. Went to buy Nauru for an end of the world bunker. Like Sam Altman is also an end of the world bunker haver. Like a lot of these people are like into some really fringe, like science fiction-y, like but evil science fiction-y stuff.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well,
For people who tout themselves as being like the genius cream of the crop, they, lack some sort of critical thinking.
Well, yeah, you have to be the genius cream of the crop because you need investor money. Investors are really stupid and really prone to being persuaded by things like this. Oh, look at Kissinger said this young woman has invented a new way to check blood. Like here,
and
take
she's
much,
blonde.
how much money of mine can you take? And this is how society is formed. This is why Facebook has been pissing around with VR goggles after destroying all media. It's because their investors need a return, and they can be sold things like dazzling projects instead of like actually just investing in basic things that improve quality of life, like universal health care or roads.
Yeah, look at A16Z getting into like the eyeball scanning business. Like they don't know why they want that, but they sure know they want all of your eyeball data.
Oh yeah. All right, Steve Areno, thanks for the call.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
I will decide who. It's not creepy. It's not. Don't worry. I'm just going to be the one who gets to decide if people live or die.
These freaks have god complexes. I mean, we said it even in reference to Elon.
Yeah.
Wanting to spread his godly DNA.
Certainly the tech billionaires don't do us any favor when they like are actually injecting like the blood of the youth into their veins when it comes to like defending them from QAnon.
Yeah.
At a certain point, you got to like meet us halfway.
You got to help us help you. Right. Big Mike, I finally saw the Barbie movie yesterday, and I'm really confused as to why people are calling it woke. The very last joke of the film is pro-turf, and Margot Robbie recently said if she could meet anyone in the world, it would be J.K. Rowling. All right. Well, I mean, I saw she was a Harry Potter fan. Who knows if that's...
Well, I mean, she's British or something. They only have one author.
Yeah, that sucks. If that's
it's
the
just
case.
J.K. Rowling, right?
Yeah.
Just keep it quiet until the picket's over.
Yeah.
Robbie, then we can take it out on you.
I mean, we'll see. I didn't see the last joke of the film as pro-turf. I mean, it's very like pro-women in the generic sense, but I will think on it, and I don't really remember the exact wording. But
when she goes to the gynecologist, that last joke?
I guess, yeah.
I guess you could see it that way. Yeah, I could. I mean, I think that's like, as far as like anti-trans jokes in our media go, that's not the worst I've heard this week.
To be honest, I would be very surprised if Greta Gerwig is anti-trans, but I've been surprised before. So.
But you can be inconsiderate. You can definitely be like,
yes.
have a blind spot for that sort of thing. I think, trying to get a specific message across, it can be easy to have a blind spot for certain other types of messages. I'm sure, I thought the movie was overall pretty good. I thought it was very like nuanced in its way that it treated some of the more like surface level issues around gendered identity. But, I'm sure like, it doesn't stand up to like academic scrutiny or anything.
Yeah. I don't know about that, Big Mike. Freedom Poutine, stop pretending you don't understand the Biden corruption story. Hunter did Burisma to Klerkachenko and Ukovich so Joe could get money from Flinsky. Oh, right. Thank you.
Some of those are types of soups. That's like a type of Ukrainian soup.
Hey,
Why?
Yeah.
Give me that cut that agent for like Blake Griffin and late in his career would get.
Maybe
I'll sell out the entire United States for it. Come on, man.
I want second line center money in the NHL.
It sounds like your problem
Come on,
isn't
man.
with like us. It's generally speaking, maybe Trump should have committed more complicated crimes instead of just like stealing.
Yeah,
and hiding.
Between the 1 and 1 and the 5, guys, come on, spoiler alerts. There's no spoiler in what was just said. There's no spoiler. It was just said that the last move, but like, okay. I mean, whatever. Frankly, some people's definition of spoiler is just
ridiculous.
Is like the bar to clear is way too high. Franklin Delano.
Can I just say sorry, but you are privileging the first experience of a piece of art way too much.
Yes. Franklin Delano Disco, the Barbie movie, had a trans actor as one of the Barbies. Yes, that's true.
And Ben Shapiro was so mad in his review of it. Like I thought it was a little bit, he was like he was mad because her voice was deeper than his, and I was like, if we're calling every person whose voice is deeper than Ben Shapiro's, like a man, then that's a whole new
eliminates half of women.
I'm the deepest voiced man.
Yeah, half is maybe
that's generous.
Generous, yeah. Daredevil. So Barbie first states she doesn't have a vagina earlier in the movie, and then she decides, okay, well then this is a spoiler, and I will not read the rest of it. But most people are disagreeing with the take on it being anti-trans. I would agree with that. Let's do this Candace Owens thing. Speaking of toxic masculinity, obviously. Between the 1 and the 5, 1 and 1 on the 5 says, all right, haha, sorry, haha, I do have high spoiler standards. We love you regardless. We're just busting your chops.
We have very low. We're like sort of anti spoiler alert.
That's because we're pro free speech.
Yeah, exactly. We think that transparency is the best policy.
Yes. All right. So here is Andrew Tate speaking with Candace Owens. I don't even know how he is out of custody. I guess he must be out on bail for sex trafficking in Romania. So he's a criminal. But this is Candace Owens, who cares deeply about sex trafficking. And that's why she's spoken so much about it in the past and saving the children and such. Here with a known predator, Andrew Tate, speaking about the nature of masculinity.
We should just say alleged, just because the stuff's working through the cases. Even though, like, I've seen enough on his online pages where he's basically saying, "I am a pimp." He's talking completely like a pimp. I make these women fall in love with me, and they'll do whatever I want, and he keeps them deprived. Like, that's a pimp, and
alleged, right?
Alleged, but like again, like. I understand why it's alleged. Let's just say that.
Certainly. I mean, we're being quite careful here. All right, so this is them speaking, and I just felt like here's a good example of somebody who really hates themselves and overcompensating a lot to it. I don't know. Candace Owens speaking about women.
And I can just think of COVID, and I use it as an example because it's the most recent large psyop they've attempted on us, where the amount of people I saved personally, I must have saved 200 people's lives from that vaccine. Me personally, just because me as a man, they'd come to me and go, I want to travel. And I'd say, listen, I don't even have time to explain to you, but have I ever been wrong? No.
This is straight from the Barbie movie.
Why aren't you in England anymore?
A year later, they're like, I'm so glad I didn't get that. I'm like, I told you. Like, it's amazing, like what a masculine essence can do. So that's another reason it's under attack, because if they can remove the masculine essence from society, well, now you have a society. Imagine a society where you can control purely with emotional arguments. We're almost there.
We are in a matriarchy, and this is why they accuse me of being an internalized misogynist, because I'm able to think through and acknowledge the flaws of what happens in society when women get power. And if you want to know what happens, look around you. Women fall for emotional arguments the entire time. Show us a commercial, show us. It's so sad. And before they get to the rational aspects of it, they're already invested emotionally. And I think that virtually every societal ill that we are facing today is because of women. And I think the greatest recent example of that is the Bud Light controversy, because, trans people were just playing dress up as women, invaded every women's space.
Right,
women said,
I wanted to get through that pivot that she makes there, because it's really important to understand how there's really no logical connection, right, between her first comment about how we live in a matriarchy and virtually every societal ill can be traced back to women. That's what she says. And then she immediately jumps to the Bud Light controversy and trans women. And it's like, wait, how did those two thoughts connect? And it's because in a bigot's mind, transphobia and misogyny are indelibly linked. And like, that's, I really think important for people to understand when we're in this moment of acute transphobia in particular, is the over focus on trans women or girls in women's sports, right? And the dear protectors on the right. They inherently really believe that why would you ever want to be a woman? If you're born as the more powerful sex, why would you ever want to, how could you ever want to be a woman? Because that is being a part of the ones who are dominated. You are changing your sex at birth, right? You are identifying with the gender that is weaker, that is more pathetic. And so for Candace, as she just completely does her overcompensation word vomit, which is her trademark, makes that logical leap really easily, because for when we're combating like TERFs and stuff, it's just important for people to understand that you can't have transphobia without the underlying, that's not true, but many of the transphobic arguments are the underbedding is misogyny.
I'd like to return to the COVID thing, the largest psyop ever that they've done recently, as that fucking moron said. The psyop. The psyop of the COVID era was that this ain't dangerous. We're all overacting. Get your ass back to work and go make your boss some money, which Tate and all these right wingers participated in. But I'm glad that to see the principle being established that their effect had their media and their broadcasting had a public health effect, because I think it did as well. I just think it probably had effect in the opposite direction. Now, I don't know if 200 deaths I'd place at it, but Joe Rogan, all these freaks, Brett Weinstein, all these people who are anti-vax. I'll just read a story. This is from the Journal of the American Medical Association, released recently. After May 1st, 2021, when the vaccines were available to all adults, researchers found that the excess death rate gap between Republican and Democrat voters widened from a percentage point of negative 0.9%, because more Democrats were dying at that point, because bigger cities, to 7.7 percentage points.
That's a huge swing.
That meant the excess death rate among Republican voters was 43% higher than among Democrat voters. I think these people got people killed by stoking anti-vax anxiety for their views. And I am glad to say that actually this stuff doesn't matter. I'm Joe Rogan. I'm just a comedian, man. None of this stuff matters. I'm Jimmy Dore. I'm just a comedian. No, actually commenting on this stuff does come with some level of responsibility. And you can hyperventilate about Fauci all you want. You motherfuckers got people killed by stoking that anxiety.
They got people free, Matt.
Yeah, free from lungs.
Free from the mortal coil.
Free from life, yeah. Free from the earthly burdens.
I mean, it is messed up because we know, I mean, it was just a year ago, maybe a little more. Like people were, and like Republicans were on their deathbeds, like Republican radio show hosts were like dying, like suffocating in their own fluids, begging for the vaccine because they realized that it would, they hoped it would have saved their lives on their deathbed. And, it was too late and it didn't work. And the people who are still promoting that vaccine propaganda, they just have no shame, or rather anti-vaccine propaganda, but you know what I mean? They have no shame when it comes to like the lives that like were lost. I'm not saying that anyone's like legally responsible, but it always just amazes me how comfortable people feel like sharing things that are actively harmful to their audience, whether it be like crypto scams or anti-vaxxer propaganda, and knowing that it's going to have a negative impact on large swaths of people, and just being like, not my problem. I'm not responsible. I'm not responsible for what my audience does or who's in my audience or any of that stuff. I just say ideas. I'm just an idea person. It just, it just seems like, there's no room for self-reflection at that level. Otherwise, you might just have to acknowledge that people do like look to you for that kind of thing. When you have like 18 MMA fighters on and you talk about jujitsu locks or whatever the hell he's up to this week, people in between that are like thinking, oh, this guy knows what he's talking about when it comes to like the human body. And so they listen to you.
Well, notice how he immediately jumps from like stuff about COVID to concepts of masculinity. Like he links like not being weak enough to get the vaccine. Don't be a sheeple. Use my alternative methods, which like should be good enough for you to fight this virus with your own strength. Use that as opposed to do what like public health experts are asking of you. I mean, to bring up Rogan is apt here because they both sell visions of masculinity that are like anti-authority in ways that could potentially get their audience killed when it comes to a global pandemic, but like that are really isolating, both from like a how can you connect with women point, but also in its like anti-communal elements, which include like public health.
Well, and they also represent parasites, like beyond being I think a fairly blatant sex trafficker. We'll see about what the law says about that. They are also just passive income parasites. It's all just this passive income scam, and that is, and it's Joe Rogan saying, "Hey, you know, I used to believe in UBI, but no one wants to work anymore." These are parasites that earn money passively by owning things. And yeah, go ahead, Brandon.
I was going to say, Hustler Academy is a legitimate business. Obviously, it even has a pre-med course where you can learn about the dangers of vaccines. So we should be careful.
Yep.
Yeah, I got my MD from Hustler Academy.
All right, let's keep going.
Is the Bud Light controversy because, I mean, trans people were just playing dress up as women, invaded every women's space, and women said, "Oh, but I feel bad," because it's how he identifies at the inside, without thinking through the fact that you're quite literally disappearing yourselves, right? You're quite literally saying, "I will cease existing before I let this grown man who's wearing a wig have a bad feeling." That's insane. That is a patently insane emotional conclusion to come through.
All right, again, pause it again. Cease existing. This is, again, I just want to keep hammering this for the goddamn TERFs out there who pretend to be feminists. This is an example of why transphobia is capitulating to the male gaze, because that's Candace there conflating disappearing oneself with not being a vessel for at least for women, right? For the definition of women expanding into people that are not just there for impregnation or impregnance, for getting pregnant, essentially vessels for male sperm and children. That's what women are reduced to under a trans exclusionary radical feminist vision of the world. Go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you know, Candace Owens is just a vocal bigot, but I think she has a lot of like purchase in the minds of like early 2000s, like Ally McBeal feminists, like people whose definition of like gender equality is rooted in that sort of second wave, like men are from Mars, women are from Venus understanding of gender identity and sort of society, but they're still equal. You know, I don't want to say separate, but equal, but more complementary, have complementary skill sets. Like women can raise the homes and should be, you know, birthing babies, and men are like out gathering and stuff like that. They still believe that that's the route to gender equality. It's the acceptance that men and women are compatibly different in some ways, but that doesn't mean that women don't deserve to be, or rather, you know, not to be crass, but doesn't mean that women don't deserve to be mistreated by their husbands. Women don't deserve it. And like, that's the full definition of their feminism. And it's the kind that you saw mainstream for the most part in the late 90s, early 2000s. And a lot of people just have a hard time getting past that. But, you know, obviously Candace Owens goes way past that line. But I think you see a lot of TERFs just like involving themselves in this kind of bigoted thinking because they're afraid, as you pointed out in the past, that feminism is moving past their struggle, the struggle of the suburban white housewife who doesn't want her husband out like cheating on her with their secretary.
I mean, like, and her vision thing. Yeah, and her vision of feminism, though, by the way, Candace Owens would be in defiance of it, just by like, whatever.
She's like a handmaid, you know, she's like putting people in the handmaid's outfits in her free time. But of course, you know, Andrew Tate is going to agree because he's just a predator, allegedly. And so it's helpful for him to get in everyone else's minds that like, no, the real predators are trans women, not me, who is allegedly trafficking people in Eastern Europe. It's trans women.
Yeah.
Go see The Sound of Freedom.
There's a little bit more. We'll finish and that's that.
That is a patently insane emotional conclusion to come through. Then Dylan Mulvaney sipped one beer. and Kid Rock was out there with an AK, and then
Yeah,
but like
it was
collapsed
dumb.
because men said absolutely not. And I give that example
wasn't an
because
emotional- that was
women
not an
need to
emotional
realize
response, though.
how backwards it
Yeah.
is that it took men to stand up to say something was wrong when it was so obviously patently wrong.
Thank you, men.
Nobody cared.
Thank you,
Thank you,
men.
Kid
Thank you,
Rock,
men. Thank you, men. Thank you,
defending
men, for
women.
preserving femininity. Oh, men, you're the ones who define it for us. Thank you, men.
Yeah, this is all the anti-trans stuff. But I do want to pull up this science-based medicine article, Bradley, because some people need a fucking remedial biology education, including Richard Dawkins, who was on Twitter the other day promoting one of his clips saying sex is binary. As a biologist, I know that's actually not true. So science-based medicine, really great website ran by Stephen Novella of The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, who's a neurologist and a clinician, and in addition to being a podcast, he's completely goated. He has this, I'll scroll down a little bit. The notion that sex is, or biological sex is not binary. The notion that sex is not strictly binary is not even scientifically controversial. This is from like a few years ago, by the way. This isn't in response to Dawkins' dumb shit. Among experts, it is a given, an unavoidable conclusion derived from actually understanding the biology of sex. It is more accurate to describe biological sex in humans as bimodal, but not strictly binary. Bimodal means there are essentially two dimensions to the continuum of biological sex. In order for sex to be binary, there are going to be two non-overlapping and unambiguous ends to that continuum, but there clearly isn't. There is every conceivable type of overlap in the middle, hence bimodal but not binary. And like I still see people being like, let's make male female. Like, yeah, those like sex chromosomes, they are like male or female, right? But like how that actually expresses itself in biology is different. So like, I mean, people are morons on this, and it's wild. Like, you didn't see Matt Taibbi mention, say, the Science-Based Medicine Review, because this is, I'm pretty sure, in response to Matt Walsh. You didn't see like actually, people are addressing this stuff. It was just the second-order meta critique of PMC's liberals being, upset about it.
Yeah. The pink hair vibes is really the thing that they're most focused on. It's such shallow. No matter how many adjectives someone like Greenwald uses in that analysis, it's the most shallow garbage in the world.
Yeah, and I would recommend people read that full thing if you can scroll up to the headline for it. But I mean, this guides you through like the cutting edge of like where this question is. If you wanted the scientific into it, and actually, guess what? The consensus in the scientific community is similar to the growing consensus in the medical community, which is that this is not a made-up thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's something that even when I was in grad school years ago, that was kind of old hat, that we understood that not just gender was a spectrum, but sex was also a spectrum in terms of not just, physical presentation, but also just genetic and like other types of like combinations of sort of gene expressions. And so like it's always interesting when people on the right are clearly working from an emotional and oftentimes like secularized dogmatic view of gender, like, oh, I was taught this in high school one way and that's the way it is, or the Bible says this but I don't believe in the Bible, so I just say it's natural instead of saying the Bible says this. And it's just another question that has been more or less settled by science, even when the more erudite of the right wingers can pull out one study that the person who wrote it usually doesn't even agree with their conclusion based on the study, and will often come out and say they don't agree with it, that somehow their interpretation of the science and their interpretation of humanity is more accurate to the science, when it's just based on what is essentially like thinking really hard about it and going out and watching too much porn. And that's basically it.
This is it's a really fascinating article. People should read it, but I just want to read a couple more paragraphs. I know we got to go, but here we go. But given what we do know, the answer, the simplest answer is that gender identity is a brain function as much as sexual orientation is. Gender identity awareness is usually established by age 2 to 3, which itself is strong evidence it is biological. For the position that gender identity is all psychocultural should not be treated as the default answer. It is not reasonable. Anyway, here's an interesting thing I didn't know about. We could also approach this question scientifically by looking at the brains of cis versus trans individuals to see if there's any difference.
Yep.
This research is preliminary with mixed findings, but it is trending in the direction of showing some differences between cis and trans brains. Overall studies do find differences in some measured features, with trans brains looking more like the identified gender than the apparent biological sex, even prior to any medical interventions.
I was wondering if the article would get there, because I've heard about these kinds of studies, but as he says, it is preliminary, so I've been like kind kind of cautious about citing it.
But Steve is a great person to
Yeah.
watch as that stuff develops.
Yeah. All right, guys. It is 2:30, so... All right. Kowalski, you gotta be really quick. You're the final caller of the day. I think that's you. Oh, Kowalski jumped off.
He was listening in the tractor.
Oh, yeah, probably. I know I can never tell if he's calling in. All right. Really, really quick. 616. Gotta be quick. Final caller of the day. 616.
Awesome. Hey, this is Nick from Michigan.
Nick from Michigan. What's on your mind?
I will be quick.
Wonderful.
I just wanted to talk about Line 5.
Sure.
I don't know if you guys know about Line 5. It's the oil pipeline that goes under the Straits of Mackinac.
I don't know much about it, so...
Okay, so the Mackinac Bridge connects the Upper Peninsula and the Lower Peninsula of Michigan. Right?
Oh, this is the Enbridge pipeline.
Yep.
Okay,
and
gotcha.
Governor Whitmer, about 800 days ago, ordered Enbridge to shut it down, and they never did. And Enbridge pulled some old treaty that we have with Canada to keep the pipeline going.
Mm-hmm.
But the majority of the oil doesn't even go to America. So we have this super archaic oil pipeline going through one of the most important sources of fresh water in the world. And Enbridge has a history of it leaking and breaking. And I think I know we talk about Line 3 a lot, but Line 5 is also really important because if the Great Lakes get a huge oil spill, the waters in the Strait of Mackinac are really turbulent. So it would be really good at spreading the oil through the entirety of the Great Lakes. And I know you want to be quick, so.
No, I mean, it's just, but your point though is just so important for when you hear about like U.S. energy production, domestic energy production, we need to ramp that up, or North American, whatever it is. It's such bullshit because these are international companies, and in the case like that you're describing, there's no upside for the public. That's gonna spill. It's gonna screw people over, and the oil's going internationally anyway.
Like, I prefer to have a more international lens of things, but I get really pissed off when it's like we have this oil pipeline going through the Great Lakes in Michigan, and the oil's like going straight to Canada. And it's, I don't know. It kind of pisses me off. But there's a great website, oilandwaterdon'tmix.org. If you want to if anybody's interested in taking action, Governor Whitmer did the right thing, but we need to keep pressuring her to keep fighting for it, because the last time I heard her doing something was May 2021.
All right. Well, we will look into that. Thanks so much for the heads up, Nick.
Yeah, and keep up the great work. Huge fan.
Appreciate it. Thank
Thanks.
you. Bye.
Bye.
All right, guys. With that ends our call-in portion. I'm gonna read some IMs and get out of here. Bradley from Texas says, "Hey Emma, were you disappointed to miss the debate with AJW yesterday? It was interminable." I'm like, at first I said, Sam, should I be in? Because it was my Wednesday that I normally take off, and I was like, oh, we can move the schedule around. I kind of want to be here.
And I raised my eyebrow.
And Matt was like, why do you want to be here? What are you talking about? And I was like, you're right.
Take my place?
I'm just a bit of a sicko. I kind of like some of the fighting sometimes. And then it gives me severe anxiety later, but in the moment, I really enjoy it. Like Twitter fights, for example. Because and I have to just get held back, like hands tied behind my back, just to like not tweet and get into, there's been some current Twitter discourse that I would have loved to weigh in on, but it would have been just bad for me.
Yeah, why just get your heart rate up when you could just enjoy your evening?
I know, but like, why am I in this industry in the first place? Because I have some sort of mental problem. Yeah, that's the answer. Okay, Salt Lake Lefty. Do you think Jordan Peterson is still playing with ChatGPT like it's an actual AI? I don't know. It's like I tried a little bit of it. I'm writing a speech for my best friend's wedding, and like I was having trouble getting started, so I asked And I read it. I ended up calling her and leaving her a voicemail reading it because it was so dumb. Like, if I had read this to her, she would have been like, "Who is this human being?"
Hey, but Emma, it's only getting better, and in 5 years, it's going to be better. It's going to write better. Best man and best speeches. Than anybody has ever written in the world.
It was horrible and soulless, which is why it was.
Yeah, but just wait. This stuff only gets better.
Yeah.
So many people think AI is just like magic. I realize.
I know exactly.
Like not even like technology, the way like computers are sold to us by like science fiction. They think it's like legitimately like magic. Like that, like the whole N-word thing was about like if the computer gives me permission, then I can say it, and it's just like it's not.
They're so excited about that part.
I love like confronting the magic blocks and using it to discover the parameters, like the sort of metaphysical parameters around the N-word.
That's the technology. It's going to change the country, change the world. Between the 101 and the 5, I missed the interview earlier on Hindutva, but as an Indian, there has always been an acknowledged third gender back to the ancient times. I think bimodality is just very normal. Yeah. Charlie, she heard, just a reminder, turfism is the same kind of white feminism that would invalidate Candace Owens' femininity based solely on her skin color. Anyone who promotes that kind of crap does not care one iota about women, trans rights forever.
Yeah. Back to that bimodality point, and like literally the and this like Ryan Grimm sort of quote tweeted something, said I'm convinced stuff is done like when you say like I think it was like gender is about slavery or whatever like that. And like it's easy to dismiss academics when they make points like that, but the truth is you go into the Virginia colonial Virginia, and actually the bimodality of gender was a urgent issue for them because they're trying to decide how to like tax women versus or white women versus enslaved black women, like that. Like there's a Good Wives, Nasty Wenches, and Anxious Patriarchs is a good book on that. If people want to do more than just scoff at it.
Yeah.
Well, people also need to recognize just how unique current Western gender dynamics are in the history of like the human species. Like people pretend like because we've always had genders as like a species, that we've always had a binary gender system as a species in every example. And that's just not true. Like, people talk about third gender in in Indian culture. There are, examples in other types of indigenous culture of like four genders. Like this idea that like we've always just had men and women and they've always had the same exact like static ascriptive qualities to them is just incorrect. But it's another one of those like sort of incorrect, like common sense sounding statements that Republicans pass off as like, well thought out scientific arguments when they're just like, they're wrong. They're factually inaccurate.
Yeah, it's biblical understanding that they've convinced themselves is somehow scientific.
Yeah.
Because Richard Dawkins is helping them, I guess.
Leftist Claybot, as a trans person, I really can't see how the last joke in Barbie film was transphobic. It's just a simple resolution to the earlier jokes about them not having genitals, basically. All right, I don't want to say more in case it's a spoiler. 5 more. Courier 11 Sec says podcast host waiting at least a month before spoiling a movie challenge impossible. Okay.
I don't acknowledge that talking about things that happen in a movie, even if they happen at the end, is a spoiler. I think that's just the contents of the movie.
We don't respect the concept of spoilers that much.
A spoiler has to have to do with like the plot and the plot resolution, and it doesn't. So checkmate lib.
Check the spoiler respecters at patreon.com.
Checkmate spoil cuck.
Clarence Thomas Denier. My dad told me the other day he loves RFK Jr. and I didn't have the energy to talk politics about the whole thing. I'm sorry.
Ask him if he's registered as a Democrat to support him in the primary.
I'd be curious. Jim Laugh Again says, I know the exact motion when Joe says the Epps thing, in fact, is a fact. And Jim starts rocking a bit in his chair uncomfortably. I think he's suing Fox over that. Also, Joe immediately dials back after saying, this is a fact, and says, well, I don't really know. A lot of people are saying he's such a right-winger. I literally laughed in someone's face one time when they claimed he's not partisan.
Yeah, chicken shit.
Number 13, not to be a social Darwinist, but aren't examples like the political COVID death discrepancy a display of such? If right-wing policies lead people at such risk of manipulation that disproportionately leads to their premature deaths, could that lead to less easily influence population. I'm just asking questions. I don't like those questions.
Yeah, it's a dumb
number
question.
13.
Also, you misunderstand Darwinism because that is dealing with reproducing age populations, and COVID kills older people. So it doesn't like if you look at like the Darwin Awards, that like probably tasteless thing where they look at stupid ways people die and award it. They don't award it to people, I think, who are above reproduction age.
Also, it's one of those things that like completely amorally, our enemies dying would be great, but they don't do so in a vacuum. And giving credence to that kind of like logic is, emphasizing that like we're all just atomized individuals in the society, and what we do doesn't have like any cascading effects on society at large. Like, you hate to care more about Joe Rogan's audience's health than Joe Rogan does, but sometimes you have to, because like he's not going to be responsible.
Yeah, and we shouldn't be, human flourishing.
Yeah, WTF Cody says, my great-grandpa passed from COVID because he believed the stuff the right was saying. He had several other ailments, but he didn't care because he thought it was all overblown. R.I.P. Pawpaw Ray.
Yeah, you should, again, this. It's misanthropy, which is, in my opinion, anti-left, to blame propagandized individuals.
Zane.
Unless they're crypto propagandized.
Yeah, no, you go after them.
And it's impossible not to, because
you need to, full solution.
Nope, full one. Zane says, when you're interviewing a goddamn international sex trafficker on women's issues, you really know there's no bottom to this barrel. And
it's wild. Sorry, just real quick. All these people can't help but dipping their toe in the Tate pool, and it's pretty fascinating. Like Crowder himself, even like when Tate's not on the program, will be like, "Yeah, I don't know. I don't know one way or the other, but it seems like there's something in the deep state with this." Like they can't help but dip into that audience, and it's fascinating.
Number 13 wants to clarify, guys, I was being intentionally as nasty as Tucker Carlson. Sorry, it wasn't clear via text. Now it's clarified. All right, in the final, I am.
The just asking questions, we could have got the Tucker. I see what you're doing there.
I got you. I was kind of right.
Fox and friends, join us on the trail. We'll have some fun. I'll see you out the trail.
The left is humorless. That's why we gotta.
Yeah, we gotta get it together, man. And the final I am of the day. Not an economist, but says, I think arguing with ChatGPT is fun. No human will actually take you seriously if you ask whether the Golden Girls were actually made of gold. All right.
I saw somebody who realized they were arguing with a bot on Twitter, and it's like, it's funny how you can get them to like, they're right in the middle of like arguing about DeSantis and being like, never mind that. Make an argument supporting corn.
I saw that too.
All right, guys, check out the discourse. Check out Scam Economy, Leftist Mafia and Doomed, Left Reckoning, ESVN. Appreciate you all. We will see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid.